Chapter 2133, Going All Out in Battle. Chapter 2133, Going All Out in Battle. This move of Long Yuexi was cutting their losses. Did she want to have the Rock Palace disbanded? Of course she didn't. However, if the Rock Palace was not disbanded, without the protection of the Heavenly Venerable Tier formation, all of them would be completely slaughtered by the Four Seas Palace. It could not be helped. Their ninth heaven Celestial King was stronger. In the Celestial Realm, top-tier battle prowess could completely determine the outcome of a battle. It could be claimed that everyone else of the Four Seas Palace could die, but as long as Shang Jiwei was still there, she could still easily eliminate the Rock Palace. What more when the scales were now leaning in favor of the Four Seas Palace? Thus, protecting what power they had to wait for a day when they could rise up again was the wisest decision to make. Grand Elder. Immediately, countless members of the Rock Palace called out, filled with defiance and fury, wanting nothing more than to commit murder with their eyes alone. Unfortunately, this did not have the slightest meaning. Ding, ding, ding. More and more people threw their weapons on the ground, and then chose to leave. Only a small minority were still gripping their weapons tightly, determined to battle, and would rather die than surrender. Stupid stubbornness. The members of the Four Seas Palace launched a fierce offensive. The outcome of this battle was already out. From this day onwards, the Rock Palace would cease to exist. Destroying the representative force of the Rock Heaven filled every single member of Four Seas Palace with adrenaline. From this day onwards, their names would be eternally written in history to be admired by later generations. Long Yuexi, I will be sending you on your way today. Shang Jiwei also unleashed an offensive. If she wanted to kill Tianyun's reincarnation, she would have to get rid of Long Yuexi first. And once Long Yuexi has fallen, the Rock Palace would really be completely destroyed, becoming nothing but another page in history. Long Yuexi gazed meaningfully at Shang Jiwei. Her initially hunched back gradually straightened, her white locks fluttering. They were actually rapidly turning black in color. Originally, she was very short, but as her back straightened, her figure actually became the same height as a normal human. No, it was even straighter and taller. This was not something as simple as straightening her back, but rather that her whole person's height had been increased greatly. A mountain wind blew past, and Long Yuexi's hair fluttered. It had turned completely black, beautiful and glossy like clouds. Looking at her face, what part of her still looked like an old woman? Instead, she was an exquisite beauty that was in the prime of her youth. Her waist was slender, her breasts bountiful, and her legs long and straight, while her skin was as smooth as jade. Her beauty was not the slightest bit inferior to Shang Jiwei's. Long Yuexi, you are finally going to stop fleeing? Shang Jiwei smirked coldly. In the past, she had also been a supreme beauty, and one whose natural talent was astounding. Naturally, her youth should have been eternal, and she would never age. However, she had sustained a serious Dao injury, and she had no choice but to focus all her energy on suppressing her wounds, causing her beauty to age and herself to look like an old woman. And now, Long Yuexi had decided to go all out in battle, forcibly pushing her condition to her strongest prime, so it was natural that her beauty would be restored. However, this would also be her final battle. Even if Shang Jiwei did not fight her, when she exited this state, she would also decline rapidly after her prime. Her Dao injury would take effect, and she would die. Shang Jiwei naturally would not give up the battle. With how proud she was, and after accumulating so many years of fury, how could she be satisfied if she did not kill her enemy with her own hands? It is just a battle. Long Yuexi was very grand and majestic, naturally exuding the aura of one who dominated the whole world. For ninth heaven celestial kings like themselves, they were just that slightest bit away from advancing to the heavenly venerable tier. Thus, it was natural that they were all incredibly assertive. However, this slight gap could not be filled no matter how much they tried. Hence, ninth heaven celestial kings were only celestial kings. Shang Jiwei gave a battle cry, and her figure flew furiously as she charged towards Long Yuexi. 9 seals shone brilliantly on her body, representing that she was a supreme empress that was practically unmatched in this world. She did not dare to underestimate Long Yuexi in the slightest, and still summoned an ancient mirror. It floated behind her, shooting out multiple streaks of light. When these streaks of light landed on her, they could further improve her battle prowess, and when they landed on Long Yuexi, they could weaken the battle prowess of her opponent slightly. This was the inheritance treasure of the Four Seas Palace, Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror, a ninth heaven celestial tool. There was no difference in strength between divine metals, but once it was forged into celestial tools, there would be a difference in power. How could it be that the celestial tool that was forged by a first heaven celestial tool would be capable of matching one that was forged by a ninth heaven celestial king? This Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror was forged by assimilating the martial intent of the generations of elites of the Four Seas Palace accumulated through the secret techniques of as many as 3 ninth heaven celestial kings, so its power was naturally extraordinary. It could definitely be considered as a ninth heaven celestial king by itself. In Xiao Gu's hands, the Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror was naturally fully activated. There was no need to expend any power belonging to Xiao Gu herself, and it could attack automatically. Long Yuexi humped and spread open her arms. A majestic light flew out from the mountains, towards her. It only stopped when it had almost reached her. Upon a closer look, this was a suit of armor. Rock armor. In the past, when the rock had attained great accomplishment in its cultivation level, it had plucked out a tendon, a bone, and a horn from its own body, and fused them with 7 divine metals to forge this armor. After further going through endless refinement of 3 generations of ninth heaven celestial kings, it had naturally become a ninth heaven celestial tool. Wang, the rock armor automatically covered Long Yuexi's body. An ancient seal shone, and immediately exuded boundless might. Celestial chi diffused, blocking the blazing light of the Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror. It could not bear the slightest effect on Long Yuexi anymore. Boom, boom, boom. The 2 great ninth heaven celestial kings began an intense battle. Even the dome of heaven was trembling. Stars that were in the proximity were struck down, turned into bits of rock that fell from the skies, and those stars that were further could not escape, either. However, they simply fell whole from the skies. Multitudes of stars dropped, and the landing of one could blast out a great ocean. Naturally, many lives were lost. When celestial kings fought, it was like doomsday had come. What more when it was a ninth heaven-level great battle? Just think, when the force of darkness had invaded in the past, countless celestial kings had burst out into great battle. In fact, even the entirety of the rock heaven had been struck to the point of breaking apart from the celestial realm and falling into the void. Beneath them, everyone was stunned for a moment before starting the battle again. Amidst sounds of fighting, the members of the Rock Palace fell against the masses. They were outnumbered. The gap was too overwhelming. But there were some that still could not let it go. It was clear that they would be able to live as long as they gave up resistance, but they still chose to fight to the bitter end. Blood sprayed, and it was a tragic sight. Ling Han never feared battle, but now he did not know what he was supposed to do. This was not his battle. Even if he was leaning more in favor of the Rock Palace because of Hunyo, to ask him to suddenly raise weapons against people he did not even know at all was still something that was very, very difficult for him. He lacked the desire to battle to ignite his fighting spirit. Run! Long Yuexi's voice rang out in his mind. Bring Yun with you and flee. Run as far as you can. From now onwards, I will entrust Yun to you. Ling Han came back to his wits. Hunyo was still inside the Black Tower, and while this precious treasure was very awesome, could it really block a ninth heaven celestial king? He did not have the slightest hesitation and ran towards the foot of the mountain with an abrupt turn. Halt! A dividing soul tier of the Four Seas Palace stood in his way. Young master, please wait for a moment. I am sure that the Lady Imperial Empress has words to speak with you. Since Xiao Gu had threatened that anyone who dared to touch a hair on Ling Han's head would be torn to pieces, it was clear how important Ling Han was. Thus, it was natural that he could not be allowed to leave. Moreover, Tianyun's reincarnation had not been found yet. She could be in anyone's spatial god tool, so it was even more natural that no one could be allowed to leave. Get lost. Ling Han shot out a punch. Pong! That person was instantly sent flying, becoming a tiny dot in the skies. Chapter 2134, Repeated Defeats. Chapter 2134, Repeated Defeats. However, that person had just been sent flying when another person came to block his way. Yet this time, it was an Immortal Palace tier. Immortal Palace tier against Dividing Soul tier meant an absolute domination, and there was no one that could be exempted. Thus, this person stood with his arms crossed behind his back, looking as confident as if he had everything under control. Young Masterling, was it? Why are you in such a rush to leave? With Lady Imperial Empress being so concerned about you, perhaps you may become our young Imperial Emperor in future. Our Four Seas Palace is a first-class force in the celestial realm. This kind of honor and wealth is something that others would not even dare to dream of, yet it is within arm's reach for you. I am really dying of envy. Ling Han laughed and said, Are you getting lost or not? If you aren't, then if I ever become that so-called young Imperial Emperor, the first head I will be cutting off would be yours. Would you believe me? Fuck. That Immortal Palace tier's face involuntarily twitched, with him feeling like he had shot himself in the foot. Immediately, the confidence in his expression had completely vanished. Indeed, with how highly Shang Jiwei prized Ling Han, even if she did not appoint Ling Han as young Imperial Emperor, the title of Holy Son or something of sort was definitely possible. And the other man was just a mere Immortal Palace tier, and could just barely be considered an elite in the Four Seas Palace. If Ling Han really wanted to make life difficult for him, who would be able to speak up on his behalf? Then, should he just step aside? But what if the crime of letting Ling Han flee was placed on him, and Shang Jiwei blamed him? Would he be able to bear the consequences? Involuntarily, he was trapped in a tight spot and felt incredible regret. If he had known, then he would have settled the matter just by knocking the other party out. Now that he had thrown out these words, he had also tossed the difficult problem in front of him. Taking advantage of the opening when this person was hesitating, Ling Han immediately channeled a movement technique, breaking into a run and fleeing. Young Master Ling, you had better stay. This person moved, grabbing out at Ling Han's shoulder. He had made his decision. Even if Ling Han wanted to make things difficult for him, it would only happen in the future, but if he allowed Ling Han to escape, then Shang Jiwei's punishment would be close at hand. He could only hate himself secretly for being so nosy and determined to run out, leading to the presently difficult situation. He faltered slightly because the space within 3,000 meters of him had all warped, as if it had become multiple mirrors, and there was a Ling Han in every single mirror. He knew that these had to be false images, but these false images were too real. Whether it was appearance or aura, there was not the slightest bit of difference from the original, reaching the point where he could not distinguish which one was the real one at all. Quite interesting, but don't you know that the gap in cultivation level between you and me is really too wide? The Immortal Palace tier humphed and stretched out his right hand. A seal that looked like a fierce tiger lit up on the back of his hand. Boom! A shock wave rippled out. Pong, pong, pong. The warped space crumbled, and the Ling Han that was in them only trembled before shattering. It was only the time for a single breath, and the 3,000 meters wide mirror space had completely collapsed. As for Ling Han, that Immortal Palace tier realized, much to his shock, that this brat had actually appeared 1,000 miles away in the distance, moving so fast that he was about to run out of the range of his vision. What was going on? Right under his nose, Ling Han had actually managed to escape and flee. With a battle cry, the man's figure moved and set off in rapid pursuit of Ling Han. In a few steps, he had already caught up with Ling Han. He once again stretched out his hand to grab him, intending to capture Ling Han. I won't believe this. A great Immortal Palace tier, and I still can't capture a Dividing Soul tier? Ling Han used the same trick again, using void space once more. Countless mirror images appeared. There were millions of him, and it was impossible to distinguish which one was real at all. I get it now. That immortal palace tier laughed loudly. Ling Han's void space actually surpassed the range of 3,000 meters, but Ling Han had deliberately limited its size, yet placed his true self outside of this range. Then, the opponent would be fooled by his first impression and think that Ling Han was within this range. Then, even after he crumbled this space, he could still do nothing against Ling Han. Good one, Brad. To actually use secret techniques as nimbly as this, what a prodigy. He had also gained the desire to cherish talent, yet knew very well that he was not qualified to take Ling Han as a disciple at all. Even a ninth heaven celestial king regarded Ling Han as very important, so what place did that leave him? With a burst of celestial power, pa, 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 the mirror space was immediately shattered once more, and while he was faltering, he saw that Ling Han had again appeared 1,000 miles away. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Being fooled once was forgivable, but he really should not have fallen for the same trick again. Was he an idiot? That immortal palace tier couldn't help but feel a sliver of anger. Ling Han had not changed his tricks at all. Yet, the 6,000-meter-wide mirror space he had spread out now was still not his limit. Thus, he had once again managed to successfully deceive him. But would you be capable of escaping? Just how much weaker is the dividing soul tier compared to immortal palace tier? Even if you used all your techniques, so what? You still will not be able to escape from the palm of my hand. His figure streaked out again and caught up with Ling Han for the third time. He stretched out his palm, and he did not change his strategy of attack, either. This was also a kind of pride. Ling Han smiled, and void space was spread out again. This time, it encompassed an area of 12,000 meters. I have already seen through your tricks, that immortal palace tier declared proudly. Boom! His large hand spread out, enshrouding a total of 24,000 meters in space. This is your limit, isn't it? The large hand pressed down, and all the images were immediately shattered. However, Ling Han's true self still did not appear. The immortal palace tier's expression immediately became incredibly dark, as if someone had delivered a harsh slap to his face. That was how embarrassing it was. Ling Han was still 1,000 miles away. This brat could actually unfold his mirror space for more than 12,000 meters. The immortal palace tier was really stunned. A mere Earth soul actually could control the regulations of space over such a large area. This was too unbelievable. Old Xian, just how many times have you moved? And you actually haven't been able to take down a mere dividing soul tier yet? Someone laughed derisively. This was a colleague from the Four Seas Palace, but their usual relations really could not be considered very amicable. Old Xian humphed, and with another step, he caught up once more with Ling Han, pulling him down with a hand. Come on then. I refuse to believe that your mirror space can have an even wider range than my attack range. However, he miscalculated. This time, Ling Han did not cast his mirror doppelgangers, but instead used the mirrors to advance rapidly. Added with a burst from the regulations of lightning, his speed reached a level that even immortal palace tiers would be moved at for an instant. Xiao, he fled before Old Xian's attack landed, escaping by a hair's breadth. This time, even those ascending origin tiers cast their eyes over, locking down on Ling Han. This dividing soul tier was truly a little freakish. Holy Daughter and Ran is only like this as well, right? I thought that Holy Daughter and Ran would definitely become the next Imperial Empress, but if this brat joins our Four Seas Palace, with how freakishly talented he is, and added with how the Imperial Empress prizes him, it would definitely have a major impact on Holy Daughter and Ran. There is definitely going to be a good show to watch. The members of the Four Seas Palace all conversed spiritedly. The battle had essentially been decided. There were only a limited few that were still stubbornly resisting, allowing them to have enough free, leisurely time to interact. Ling Han did not flee any longer. Though he had successfully escaped from the hands of an immortal palace tier 4 times, and could do so even 5 or 10 times more, there would ultimately be a time when techniques could no longer be used. Hide into the Black Tower? That was a question. There were hundreds of celestial kings here, And when Shang Wei got a hand free, the power of a ninth heaven celestial king was even more unpredictable. Old Xian, do you just have this little bit of power? He laughed loudly, beginning to mock Old Xian. Old Xian's face was flushed red, feeling like there were countless eyes directed on him, and making him want nothing more than to find a hole that he could bury himself in. He moved once more, grabbing out towards Ling Han. Chapter 2135, Xiao Gu was also good at attracting animosity. Chapter 2135, Xiao Gu was also good at attracting animosity. Yaya! A familiar call rang out, and a streak of light rapidly shot over. Old Xian was stunned, and had not even come back to his wits when pong, this streak of light had already crashed into his back. He was instantly harshly slammed into the ground, landing solidly. The speed of the light streak also decreased, and everyone could see it clearly. This was actually a snow-white bone. The bone floated in midair entwined by threads of light, slowly taking human form. Who else could it be but Xiao Gu? Yaya! When Xiao Gu spotted Ling Han, he appeared very elated. Pretty girl, give me a smile. My lord, don't do anything foolish. Wife, our host should be sent for repair. Xiao Gu immediately began chattering and mimicking word after word, with completely no sign of stopping anytime soon. Everyone was watching in shock, dumbfounded. This bone had come in such an astonishing manner, but what was it actually blurting out now? Meanwhile, Ling Han laughed loudly. For these 10,000 years, who knew how many conversations Xiao Gu had listened in on? He was naturally feeling very suffocated. So how could he be satisfied without mimicking to his heart's content? Xiao Gu, help me escape, he said. Xiao Gu, help me escape, Xiao Gu said as well, his expression completely serious. Fuck. Ling Han sighed plaintively. Thus Xiao Gu was always undependable when it came to crucial moments. Humph, since you are already here, then both of you should stay behind. An ascending origin tear moved, grabbing at both Ling Han and Xiao Gu. Humph, since you are already here, Xiao Gu copied the words, stretching out his hand as well, and grabbing out at the other. Pong! The two hands crashed into each other, and the light of regulations exploded. The large hand that Xiao Gu had extended burst through the other's large hand on an unstoppable course, continuing the course to grab ahead. Not good! That ascending origin tear exclaimed in shock, and hurriedly turned around and fled. Not good. Xiao Gu did not realize that he was presently fighting another person at all. He, too, exclaimed in shock and turned and fled. Everyone watched this happen, their faces twitching madly. How could he play around with someone like that? That was going too far. That ascending origin tear wanted to throw up blood in his fury. If I can't match you, it would be due to my inferior strength, but you actually copy the way that I flee. What kind of horrible humiliation is that to me? This could not be tolerated. It was unacceptable. Ling Han rubbed his chin. Xiao Gu was clearly adorably dumb, but why could he instantly infuriate others to the extent that they would be hopping mad? If it had been the large black dog, that would have been logical. It was extraordinarily despicable by nature, and it would be nothing strange even if it managed to drive a celestial king to death with fury. Fong Tang, step back. A figure descended from the skies, enshrouded in extraordinary light. A celestial king. That ascending origin tear hurriedly paid his greetings respectfully and stepped aside. A celestial king, no matter which heaven they were at, was still a supreme being. Anyone who had not reached this level could only treat them with utter respect. That celestial king looked at Xiao Gu and revealed an expression of shock. It was clearly only a bone, but why would it have such might? When a celestial king acted, they naturally had no reservations. Stretching out his hand, he grabbed out at Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu was in high spirits. With so many people playing with him, this was fun. He also stretched out his hand, copying the other's movement. Humph! That celestial king showed a hint of displeasure. I am a second heaven celestial king, and you think I am just any random minor character? Pong! The two hands crashed into one another, and one of them immediately crumbled. Unexpectedly, the hand that was shattered was actually the one that had been sent out by that celestial king. Boom! The large hand that Xiao Gu sent out continued to grab out at that celestial king. What? That celestial king exclaimed in shock and hurriedly turned and fled. What? Xiao Gu imitated him to perfection and also turned around and fled. This? Everyone's cheek was twitching. They felt that Xiao Gu was really too insulting. It's enough that you won, so why do you have to go so far? They were both celestial kings and had cultivated to this kind of height, so how could they be so tasteless? Why you? That celestial king had already turned around, fuming mad with fury. Why you? Xiao Gu also bared his teeth, copying him to absolute perfection. This was too far. This was really going too far. To say nothing of the fact that the celestial king wanted to commit murder. Even the others were shaking their heads continuously. How could he do that? I, Lu Feng, swear that we cannot exist together. That celestial king roared furiously, his expression twisted in anger. Men could be killed, but couldn't be insulted. A celestial king was noble and proud, standing equal to heaven and earth, so how could they be allowed to be slighted? I, Lu Feng, swear that we cannot exist together. Xiao Gu's expression was similarly twisted, and he was practically howling with fury. By now, he had improved further. Not only could he mimic words, he would also add in some input of expression, appearing to be even more exaggerated. Everyone was about to pass out. Not only were you mimicking others as mockery, you were even stealing their names. This would mean a deadly feud. Lu Feng, another elite, descended from the skies. 5-colored light enshrouded him, representing that he was a fifth heaven celestial king. Lord Wu Hong, the celestial king from before, hurriedly greeted him respectfully. There were a total of 3 heavens between the two of them. He needed to maintain an attitude of absolute respect. Wu Hong nodded. His expression was slightly solemn. You are no match for this person. Lu Feng was a little defiant. Though he had fallen into a disadvantage in the previous clash, he still had a very strong confidence that if he went all out in battle, it would not be certain that he would lose. However, Wu Hong actually determined that he was no match for Xiao Gu so decisively, which made him feel very defiant. He stepped back, giving way to Wu Hong. Sir, you are really outrageously bold, to dare to interfere even in the matters of our 4 Seas palace, Wu Hong said menacingly. Sir, you are really... Xiao Gu was extremely happy, mimicking as he liked, and driving others mad with fury. Wu Hong's expression involuntarily darkened. You are a celestial king yourself, so what is so fun about mimicking others like this? You are a... Xiao Gu's expression darkened even further, looking completely livid. Damn you! Wu Hong was furious. With a soft exclamation, he moved. Boom! Endless immortal flames burned brightly and ferociously. He sent out a punch, an ancient seal of great Tao on his fist as the blow headed to suppress Xiao Gu. Damn you! Xiao Gu similarly looked like he had flown into a fury and approached in anger. Boom! Because Xiao Gu was copying completely, their 2 fists naturally crashed into one another, generating a world-shaking boom. Celestial light surged out as if the heaven and earth were being split apart, evolving into millions of worlds. Boom! Wu Hong was sent flying from the force while drawing out an arc in the skies, blood spraying madly from his whole body. When Xiao Gu saw this, he made an ah, and also rolled backwards, forcing out blood to pour from his body. However, his body itself had been copied, so to say nothing of just bleeding a little, he would be fine even if he was beheaded. Everyone couldn't help but feel speechless. They had never seen someone so despicable. Ling Han was feeling gratified, though. Xiao Gu was no longer just simply mimicking, but had already inserted some of his own performing skills. For example, in that exclamation of ah, Wu Hong had not released such a pained cry. It was added in by Xiao Gu himself. There was improvement. Who knew, endless years later, Xiao Gu could possibly awaken his intelligence a second time and ascend Tao once more. Meanwhile, Lu Feng's expression was filled with grief. He now knew that Wu Hong had not seen wrongly. He really was no match for Xiao Gu. Even a fifth heaven celestial king had been sent flying. Even if the strength of both sides was close to equal, suppressing him would only be the matter of a few moves. What was more terrifying was that this perhaps wasn't even Xiao Gu's full strength. Sixth heaven? Seventh heaven? Eighth heaven? Or even a supreme being of ninth heaven. Xiao, another celestial king, descended, seven-colored light entwined around him. His whole body was also brimming with the air of primal chaos. His features could not be distinguished clearly, but the pressure that came from a supreme being was rippling out. Seventh Heaven Celestial King. Chapter 2136, Long Yuexi dies. Chapter 2136, Long Yuexi dies. The Four Seas Palace had abundant wealth. When a second Heaven Celestial King was outmatched, a fifth Heaven Celestial King would immediately jump out. And when a fifth Heaven Celestial King was outmatched, a seventh Heaven Celestial King would emerge. Finally, didn't they still have an overlord like a ninth Heaven Celestial King? You dare interfere in the business of our Four Seas Palace, I will let you know your own measure. This seventh Heaven Celestial King moved decisively, and a massive palm immediately descended from the skies, pressing down on Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu naturally copied him exactly. After repeating his words, he immediately pressed out his own palm towards the other. He did not know how to dodge at all. Immediately, he was blasted solidly by the massive palm, and that seventh Heaven Celestial King's figure flashed and appeared out of the attack range of this palm strike from Xiao Gu. Hong, long, long. A seventh Heaven Celestial King had moved. This might was really too domineering. Even if this was the Rock Palace, where every mountain rock was tempered to an incredibly high degree by the rock, a gigantic pit was still created from the blast, and Xiao Gu had also disappeared in this depression. Ha 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 ha, now that the spiritual mountain Celestial King has moved, it is very easy as expected. That's right. The spiritual mountain Celestial King has been a super monarch tier in the past, and now has hopes of attaining 8th heaven. His strength could even match some weaker 8th heaven Celestial Kings. To actually dare toy around with the spiritual mountain Celestial King, he really was seeking his own death. The members of the Four Seas Palace were all smirking coldly. In terms of cultivation level, the spiritual mountain Celestial King was ranked 3rd in the Four Seas Palace, but his strength was inferior only to Shangji Wei. He was the 2nd strongest elite of the Four Seas Palace. If he moved personally, how many in this world would he actually be incapable of suppressing? However, the spiritual mountain Celestial King did not smile. Instead, he became solemn. With a light wave, the dust and rocks that were flying in the deep pit were immediately swept away. At the bottom of the vacant pit, a person immediately appeared. It could not be called a person, but rather a bone. It was snow-white and crystalline, and possessed an incredibly ancient seal, exuding an aura of age. Xiao Gu. The members of the Four Seas Palace had all seen very clearly that when Xiao Gu had flown here, he was just a bone, and now he was still a bone. What did that mean? That he had not been injured at all. Hiss, the move from a 7th Heaven Celestial King actually did not succeed. To call it a complete failure would be inappropriate as well. At least, the body that Xiao Gu had formed had been shattered, which had still proven how strong the spiritual mountain Celestial King was. Previously, neither Lu Feng or Wu Hong had been able to do that at all. Just what exactly are you? The spiritual mountain Celestial King asked in a low voice. The other's true body was just a bone, but was there such a powerful bone in this world? Just what exactly are you? Xiao Gu copied his words as he reformed his body. The spiritual mountain Celestial King stared at Xiao Gu for a moment and dismissed the thought of communicating with Xiao Gu. Whether Xiao Gu was deliberately mimicking him or only knew how to speak through mimicry, it was clear that he could not possibly say anything valuable. Then, what was the point of wasting words? There was only one thing left to do: battle. The spiritual mountain Celestial King moved without hesitation and began fighting Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu's expression was completely one of puzzlement. Why aren't you talking anymore? What is fun about just fighting and not talking? He dealt with the battle in a passive way, merely parrying without bothering to counter. The spiritual mountain celestial king was indeed very strong. He was an overlord among monarch tiers, his battle prowess having surpassed even 7th heaven and advanced into 8th heaven. It should be known that there was the saying that every level of celestial king tier brought one closer to ascending the heavens. With a difference of a minor level, that meant a world of difference in strength. Regarding the saying that king tiers could be invincible among their peers, or how emperor tiers would be able to crush their opponents that were a minor level superior, that was completely useless in the celestial king tier. In truth, it was very rare that king tiers would be able to advance into the celestial king tier, unless they gained incredibly good fortune in the future. Only emperor tiers could possibly become celestial kings, and even then it was just a portion of them. It was only definite that monarch tiers could become celestial kings, and no matter what, they would become 4th heaven or 5th heaven celestial kings at least, but to speak of having tier-surpassing battle prowess, even monarch tiers could not possibly have it. Only super monarch tiers could achieve that. The spiritual mountain celestial king was one such monarch tier. His cultivation level was 7th heaven celestial king tier, but his battle prowess had reached 8th heaven celestial king tier. In fact, even among 8th heaven celestial kings, his battle prowess could place him in the middle ranks. This was too strong. To say nothing of the fact that Xiao Gu was presently muddle-headed and did not know to counter at all. Even if he rose up in resistance, it was definitely impossible that he would be a match for the spiritual mountain celestial king. This spiritual mountain celestial king could already be compared to the Black Dragon King. However, Xiao Gu had an astonishing advantage, and that was the strength of his defense was astounding. In truth, he was just a bone. If the bone was not damaged, he would be fine, and the toughness of his bone could compare to divine metals. With how tough divine metal was, even a 9th heaven celestial king could not break it by force. They could only slowly melt it down through the power of regulation. Thus, if the spiritual mountain celestial king wanted to pose a true threat to Xiao Gu, he could only use the power of regulation to refine Xiao Gu. Otherwise, it would only be wasted effort. But to accomplish this was really much too difficult. Xiao Gu had terrifyingly high accomplishments in regulations of space. No matter how the spiritual mountain celestial king trapped him, it was useless. Xiao Gu would still be able to easily break free. This caused the battle to sink into a stalemate. It was clear that the spiritual mountain celestial king was completely in an advantageous position, yet no matter how hard he tried, he could not turn his advantage into a victory. Because Ling Han was already trapped, no one made any further move on him. After all, someone had experienced a loss at his hands before. If anyone made a move on Ling Han, it would definitely force them into a dilemma. In that case, they might just as well trap Ling Han here. In the skies, for great celestial kings battled strongly. Shang Jiwei against Long Yuexi, and Xiao Gu against the spiritual mountain celestial king. Both battles were incredibly intense. However, there was practically no one that could see these two battles, because these four were really too powerful. Not only were they moving at an astonishing speed, their attacks were the same as well. What others could see were actually just the halos of bright light that exploded in flashes. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time trickled by. It would be nothing strange for great battles between celestial kings to last a few years, or even tens of thousands of years. Thus, everyone was not anxious. The rock heaven had existed for countless epochs, and so what if they had to spend several or even several tens of thousands of years to exterminate it? But merely 10 days later, one battle suddenly stopped, and no further brilliant light that could dazzle the heavens surged. Which battle was it? Shang Jiwei against Long Yuexi? Or Xiao Gu against the spiritual mountain celestial king? In only a while, the answer was revealed. A figure suddenly dropped rapidly from the skies and landed on the ground loudly. The two massive wings spread behind her back exuded an endless, boundless might, and the skin that was exposed was covered with dragon scales. This person could not be seen clearly at all. But there was no need to see the face, and they could confirm that this person was Long Yuexi because these were the wings of the rock. Could it be that Long Yuexi had won? The members of the Four Seas Palace were all stunned, while the members of the Rock Palace were overjoyed. If the Grand Elder won, then there would be no need for the Rock Palace to be disbanded, and this would have also dealt with a strong enemy like the Four Seas Palace. In the future, the Rock Palace would be able to regain its domineering stand as a Ninth Heaven Celestial King tier force. Pong! Another person flew down and landed, an ancient mirror shining brilliantly behind her. Shang Wei, you have won, but you have also lost, Long Yuexi said. When she said the first word, her voice was still very clear, but her voice became older as she spoke the second, and the dragon scales covering her body were also falling off piece by piece. Her black hair turned gray, and then from gray it turned white. In an instant, she had turned back into an old woman. She laughed loudly, and then came to an abrupt stop. Not a single sign of life could be seen. Crack! Suddenly, a thunderous crack resounded in the heaven and earth, followed by an endless rain of blood. A lamenting sound was heard loudly, causing everyone to feel a sadness and grief rise up from the bottoms of their hearts, and when they wiped their eyes, they were filled with tears. A celestial king had died, and the heaven and earth grieved. Chapter 2137, Partiality. Chapter 2137, Partiality. Long Yuexi had died. A celestial king of her generation, a ninth heaven overlord, practically the strongest existence in the celestial realm, someone who had endured countless epics and borne witness to changes over the ages, had still finally died and returned to dust. If it were not for the fact that she could not let it go, she should have died long ago, several epochs ago. Grand Elder. The members of the Rock Palace all wept. Even Elder Fuyun showed a hint of grief in her expression. She had sided with the Four Seas Palace because she was incredibly realistic. However, it did not mean that her heart was already leaning in favor of the Four Seas Palace. Long live the Imperial Empress! The members of the Four Seas Palace, meanwhile, were all excited. With Long Yuexi's death, the Rock Palace was finally conquered. Shang Wei did not feel any kind of happiness. Instead, she showed a disappointed and frustrated expression. Perhaps it was Long Yuexi's final words that pierced her heart. Long ago, several epochs ago, she had already lost to Tianyun, and it was a complete, absolute loss at that. Tianyun and Yuan Shang had both long since died, and now Long Yuexi had also died. So what if Shang Wei was the one to have the last laugh? When the flames of her vengeance were calmed, what meaning would there be left to her life? After I kill Tianyun's reincarnation and settle the matters of the palace, I will go to the doorway of darkness and battle with those elites from the foreign realm right until I bleed the last drop of my blood, she murmured. Pacifying the storm of darkness, this was Yuan Shang's strongest wish. Though I cannot realize it on his behalf, I will definitely try my best. Long Yuexi, though you have been my lifelong enemy, any crimes would be cleared with death. Taking into consideration the fact that you, too, are a ninth heaven celestial king, I shall offer you a funeral, she declared loudly. With a wave of her hand, boom, the indestructible rock mountains were forcibly torn apart, as if they were merely a painting being unfurled. With another wave of her hand, she delivered Long Yuexi's body into the mountain range that was torn open. Then, with her clapping her hands together, the mountains immediately returned to their original state, as if nothing had happened previously at all. This was the strength of a ninth heaven celestial king. Others would only manage to bump a few rocks off after fighting for so long, but she could easily cause damage. Enough, she spoke up again, filled with dominance. Greetings, Imperial Empress. The spiritual mountain celestial king descended, half kneeling in front of her, and appearing incredibly reverent, but the lowered gaze held a very strong adoration. He has always loved Shang Wei, and the fact that he was willing to stay as a number 2 in the Four Seas Palace was also because of this. However, he had never dared to confess his feelings, fearing that after he was rejected, Shang Jiwei would expel him from the Four Seas Palace. Xiao Gu had his own principles when he was mimicking and impersonating. Though he saw how the spiritual mountain celestial king had half knelt, he did not kneel down alongside him, but rather went off in a daze on the sidelines. So it's old bone demon. Shang Jiwei looked at Xiao Gu. It was rumored that you had already died several epochs ago, and it looks like the rumors were not false. The consciousness that was born from the celestial bone has already died out, and the intelligence of this newly born one is no more than that of a 3-year-old. She had excellent insight, and could tell Xiao Gu's origins with a single glance. So it's old bone demon. Xiao Gu was very interested, and began mimicking her words. Shang Jiwei did not take offense. Her gaze turned to Ling Han, a complex expression appearing on her face. After a long while, she finally said, "You are Yuan Shang's disciple, and that would make you my disciple, my child." When these words were spoken, a storm of protest rose among the members of the Four Seas Palace. A disciple was one thing, as Shang Jiwei had a total of 3 personal disciples, but a child? Shang Jiwei had never married, so it was naturally impossible that she would have any children. In that case, what kind of privileges would Ling Han have? Becoming the young imperial emperor of Four Seas Palace? Though everyone was unwilling to accept this, no one dared to say anything. They could only feel envy. The Four Seas Palace had always been ruled by Shang Jiwei's word alone. This was also the privilege due to a 9th heaven celestial king, the high and lofty status of a divinity. "You are Yuan Shang's disciple." Xiao Gu was also mimicking from the side, copying Shang Jiwei's expression and actions completely, and causing Ling Han to involuntarily feel gloomy. "You actually want to become my father as well? Hand over Tianyun's reincarnation." Shang Jiwei looked at Ling Han, her eyes holding benevolence. She was really treating Ling Han like her own child. "Hand over Tianyun's," Xiao Gu repeated. Ling Han pretended to be puzzled and asked, "What Tianyun's reincarnation?" "Tianyun's reincarnation has definitely not left the rock heaven, and she is not in anyone's spatial god tool either. Then there is only one possibility, and that is she is inside that Yuan Shang forged spatial god tool," stated calmly. However, she deliberately skipped over the name of the Tower of 3 Realms. It seemed like she knew that the effects of this name were overwhelming. Xiao Gu still copied, completely shamelessly. Ling Han was inwardly stunned. Shang Jiwei had only done a sweep with her divine sense, and she had already scanned over every single person's spatial god tool. As expected of a 9th heaven celestial king, she was too strong. However, there was absolutely no way that he would hand Hunyou over. Thus, he said, "Aunt Wei, Senior Tianyun has long since died. The Hunyou now is only Hunyou. She only possesses the martial imprint of Senior Tianyun, yet is a completely independent personality. She is only a junior of yours, so why should you lower yourself to her level?" To play the fool with the 9th heaven celestial king was clearly a very stupid thing to do. However, Ling Han was truly shameless, and had even directly addressed her as Aunt Wei, causing the members of the Four Seas Palace to exclaim at his shamelessness. He was really too quick to go along with her lead. However, this address of Aunt Wei made Shang Jiwei feel elated. If she had been able to lay down her love for Yuan Shang, she would not have possibly targeted the Rock Palace for so many years. As the saying went, the stronger the love, the stronger the hate that would result. What made her most despondent was the fact that she had never gotten any recognition. However, when Ling Han addressed her as Aunt Wei, it was equivalent to giving her status on behalf of the karmic life heavenly venerable. To Shang Jiwei, what could be more important than that? Involuntarily, she smiled and said, "You have a really sweet tongue, child." "You have a really..." Xiao Gu copied her words earnestly and tirelessly. "However, as long as it is related to Tianyun, then it has to be destroyed. I cannot allow any sliver of her to remain in this world." Shang Jiwei declared decisively. Her hatred towards Tianyun was not something that could be resolved by just the words, "Aunt Wei." "Aunt Wei, it is easy to make enemies, but hard to resolve grudges. It would be better that you just let it go," Ling Han advised from the sidelines. Shang Jiwei's eyes blazed. You are merely besotted by that little girl's beauty. It is not true love. I have a disciple who is as beautiful as a celestial maiden. She is definitely in no way inferior to that little girl. Her temperament is gentle, and she has excellent natural talent and cultivation. I will make the decision and betroth her to you. She would be a truly good match for you. Hearing these words, the members of the Four Seas Palace were all dumbfounded. Shang Jiwei had a total of 3 disciples, but only one of them was female. Thus, she had to be speaking of Holy Daughter Ran. True, Holy Daughter Ran was extraordinarily talented in cultivation, and practically looked like she would become the second Shang Jiwei. Furthermore, she was also as beautiful as a celestial maiden. She was a truly exquisite beauty, but to say that she had a gentle temperament, everyone shook their heads in unison, filled with disbelief. Holy Daughter Ran definitely had absolutely no relation with these words. This woman was incredibly proud, just like a peacock spreading its tail feathers. To say nothing of peers, even in Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier, there were not many that she truly paid any regard to. If she knew that Shang Jiwei wanted to marry her off to Ling Han, she would probably explode. Furthermore, just how much did Shang Jiwei dote on Ling Han? Shang Jiwei had always considered Holy Daughter Ran as her own daughter, yet now she was easily betrothing her hand to another like this. She did not even bother to ask, so it was clear just how partial she was to Ling Han, right? This was very much to be envied. The members of the Four Seas Palace all looked at Ling Han, and even a great many celestial kings were no exception. Chapter 2138, Four Seas City. Chapter 2138, Four Seas City. Ling Han shook his head and smiled. Aunt Wei, I already have a beautiful wife, and am fully satisfied. There is no need to involve others for my sake. No. Shang Jiwei shook her head resolutely. She had not succeeded in her own romance, which caused her to develop an extremist personality. Moreover, Ling Han was the heir of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, while Ran was her disciple. As she saw it, this was the continuation of the affections from the previous generation and could compensate for her regrets. One refused repeatedly, while the other was forcibly coercing him, and they bargained over and over again. Everyone was speechless. Was this still a ninth heaven celestial king? How was it that she now seemed like a matchmaker? Moreover, if Holy Daughter Ran knew about this, she would definitely fly into a thunderous rage. I have not complained about you yet, and you actually dare to reject me? Or so she'd say. Child, you really are stubborn. Shang Jiwei shook her head, but her eyes were filled with doting adoration. She had truly taken Ling Han to be her own son, and was using this kind of manner to pretend that she had finally married the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. She did not bother to talk any further with Ling Han. With a grab of her hand, Ling Han could not resist at all, and she had used her great power to grab him over, turning him into a mustard seed. We return to the palace, she exclaimed. Immediately, the masses subsided like floodwaters. Meanwhile, Shang Jiwei directly tore a hole into space and traveled to the Four Seas Palace with a leap. She had not achieved Dao through regulations of space, but having been a ninth heaven celestial king for several epochs, she had abundant time to cultivate other regulations of great Dao as well. Thus, she could naturally cast space teleportation easily. Practically every ninth heaven celestial king was strong in every area. Thus, to dominate over your peers and become an overlord even among ninth heaven celestial kings was incredibly difficult. The spiritual mountain celestial king also tore a rip into space and followed Shang Jiwei. He had not reached ninth heaven, but even with his natural talent, breaking through one heaven would need boundless time. He would be blocked by the cultivation level barrier for several 100 million years without advancing the slightest inch. Thus, he naturally would also be cultivating other regulations in his free time, and space and time were definitely the best options for him. However, even if a celestial king was going to study these two regulations, they would need corresponding celestial medicines or corresponding source powers of heaven and earth. Otherwise, if they just relied on their own studies, their progress could be considered extremely minor. Thus, he was very soon left so far behind Shang Jiwei that he could not even see a sign of her. His brow furrowed in a slight frown. There was something troubling him. At first, he had planned to confess his feelings to Shang Jiwei after destroying the Rock Palace because Shang Jiwei would have already severed the last links she had with her old love. Yet now, Ling Han had actually popped out, causing Shang Jiwei's motherly affection to overflow. This had disrupted his plans completely. He loved Shang Jiwei, so he naturally could not allow Shang Jiwei to have another man in her heart, even if she only considered this man as a child or nephew. Thus, he considered Ling Han as a thorn in his side. There was another reason. His disciple, Lin Xian, was also extremely captivated by Enran, and now Shang Jiwei actually planned to betroth Enran to Ling Han. Then, Lin Xian's hopes would naturally come to nothing. He was also very fond of this disciple of his, and considered him his own son. Now that his daughter-in-law was being taken, he was naturally displeased about it. These two reasons compounded together caused the spiritual mountain celestial king's killing intent to soar. Of course, there was definitely no possibility that he would make a move on Ling Han. If he did make a move, with Shang Jiwei's insight, she would definitely be able to tell. By then, even if Shang Jiwei did not kill him on the basis of their previous relations, she would definitely still mercilessly expel him, to say the least. It would be eternally impossible for there to be any outcome between the two of them. However, was there any need for him to act personally when killing a mere dividing soul tier? There were more than enough elites that could kill this brat. For example, his disciple, Lin Xian, was already at first secret of the Immortal Palace tier, and was a monarch tier at that. Wouldn't suppressing Ling Han be a very simple matter for him? There were too many cases of failing to pull back in time in a spar, and accidentally killing someone. Even Shang Jiwei couldn't do anything about that, could she? Moreover, with how proud Enran was, if she found out that Shang Jiwei had betrothed her to Ling Han, she, too, would probably be stomping with fury and be the first to jump out and deal with Ling Han. Enran was also at first secret, and her battle prowess was in fact slightly superior even to Lin Xian's. There would be abundant opportunities for murder. The Four Seas Palace was quite far away from the Rock Palace. Thus, even a ninth heaven celestial king would have to spend 7 days to complete the journey. Shua, Shang Jiwei's figure flashed and appeared in front of a majestic great city. The Four Seas Palace was not as simple as just a palace, but rather was a great city on the sea. It floated in the great ocean, as large as a star. How could a city possibly float on the ocean? It was not that the great city had been boosted by some kind of formations and possessed the ability to stay afloat, but rather that there was a gigantic turtle below, bearing its weight. It was endlessly swimming in the ocean, and who knew how many epochs had passed. This great turtle had always been floating just like that on the surface of the ocean, and would eternally continue to float like this. The Four Seas Palace ruled over this great city, and the true location of their sect was in the core of this city. There was a chain of connected palaces, and they were all sea blue in color. Under the sunlight, they looked like rippling waves. Respects for the Imperial Empress. As Shang Jiwei passed, the people on the streets all paid their respects. Though attacking the Rock Palace had practically mobilized all the elites of the sect, there were still a great many servants and protective forces left behind to prevent their headquarters from being completely wiped out while they were off on their assault on the Rock Palace. When she arrived at the main palace, Shang Jiwei tossed out her hand, and Ling Han immediately enlarged, returning back to his original size. Tianyun's reincarnation, she said once more, but her tone was now extremely strict. Ling Han could only act shamelessly. Shaking his head, he said, Hunyou is just Hunyou. She doesn't have much connection with Senior Tianyun. At present, he had two things he could fall back on. The first was Shang Jiwei's protective affections for him, and the second was the might of the Black Tower that could carry him off and flight away from this place. Small Tower was extremely confident that even a heavenly venerable tier could not possibly stop it from leaving. Of course, if he could settle matters peacefully, that was naturally best. Shang Jiwei looked at Ling Han steadily, supreme assertiveness on her beautiful face, seemingly wanting to intimidate Ling Han into giving in. Unfortunately, Ling Han was least scared of this. After a while, Shang Jiwei suddenly broke into a smile. And Ran is about to come out of seclusion. You two should get to know each other first. If she wanted to capture Ling Han, it would naturally be a piece of cake for her, but unlocking the Tower of Three Realms was another story. Furthermore, she also truly considered Ling Han as her own descendant, and did not want to force Ling Han into doing something that he did not wish to. Thus, she came up with a very good idea. Have Ling Han fall for Ran, and he naturally would forget about Tianyun's reincarnation and obediently hand her over. Though Ling Han did not want to get to know that Ran, since Shang Jiwei did not speak about the matter of Hunyou, he naturally would not be reminding her. In any case, affections had to be mutual. If he stayed cool and indifferent on his side, how could Ran actually fall in love with him? 1. For the time being, that was the plan. He nodded. I'll do as you say, Aunt Wei. Shang Jiwei was very pleased. The affections of the previous generation had no outcome, and she was determined that they would be realized in this later generation. Go on. You can walk around as you like in the palace and in the city. He could walk around wherever he liked in the palace and in the city, but another meaning to her words was that he could not leave the city. That was because Tianyun's reincarnation was still with him. Before he handed her over, Shang Jiwei would not let him leave no matter what. Ling Han excused himself and exited the main hall. Then, he saw an elder dressed in black robes appear noiselessly. This elder bowed to him in greeting. Young Master Ling, this old servant shall show you around first and arrange accommodations for you as well. Chapter 2139, Holy Daughter and Ran. Chapter 2139, Holy Daughter and Ran. This black-robed elder's face was covered with wrinkles, and he looked to be in his 60s or 70s. His hair was completely white and his body slightly hunched, appearing old and decrepit. However, Ling Han did not dare to underestimate this old geezer in the slightest, because this old geezer's strength was unfathomable. He had definitely surpassed the Dividing Soul, and might be at the Immortal Palace tier or Ascending Origin tier. It should not be that he was a celestial king. There was no celestial king that would lower themselves to this extent. Furthermore, he was not wrapped by any strange lights either. This was a symbol of celestial king tier. Ling Han smiled. Old sir, how do I address you? I would not dare. This old servant's surname is Chen, and I am a person who takes care of trivial matters in the palace. Young Master Ling can just address me as Manager Chen, the black-robed elder said, his attitude appearing incredibly humble. Manager Chen. Ling Han bowed. I have troubled you. No trouble, no trouble. Manager Chen chuckled. Please follow me. The old man walked ahead, while Ling Han followed behind him. As they walked, Manager Chen would give Ling Han a commentary about which place was which lord's abode. For example, the spiritual mountain celestial king and the others would naturally have a palace of their own, which was like a different world inside, and was incredibly colossal. All of a sudden, Ling Han's steps paused. He felt a menacing intent enshroud him, as if there was a supreme divine sword that was just about to stab a hole through him. This old servant pays respects to Holy Daughter and Ran. Manager Chen bent his waist in respect in a certain direction, while his gaze roamed over Ling Han, showing a hint of surprise, seemingly stunned that Ling Han had actually been able to also discover something was off. Was it a coincidence? If it was not a coincidence, then this boy's awareness was really too sensitive. A red figure flashed, and a woman leaped out. She wore a bright red body-fitting suit, outlining her pride-worthy, voluptuous figure on full display. Her beauty was also astonishingly exquisite. Though she was not as beautiful as the Empress and Hunyou, she was on par with Bewitching Maiden Ro, but her style was strikingly different. Bewitching Maiden Ro was captivatingly seductive, while this woman was fiery, just like a rose with thorns. This was Shang Jiwei's personal disciple. Her name was Ran, and she was also known as Holy Daughter Ran. Ran nodded slightly at Manager Chen. Though this person was not a celestial king, He was an old servant of the Four Seas Palace and was deeply trusted by Shangji Wei. Thus, she also gave him some face. Otherwise, who could garner a second glance from her if they were not a celestial king? She glanced at Ling Han again and calmly stated, "Get out immediately from the Four Seas City and don't have any wild delusions." She was really overbearing and did not care what Ling Han's own thoughts were at all. There was only one word that she wanted to say, "Scram." Ling Han chuckled and replied, "Sure, but I will have to trouble you to send me off." He indeed wanted to leave, but without handing Hun Yo over, there was absolutely no way that Shangji Wei would deliver him out of here. Thus, if Enran could send him out of the Four Seas City, Ling Han would naturally leave happily. Enran's eyes became harsh. Send you off? What was the meaning of that? Trying to get close to her? She humphed, "I'll give you 1 day's time, and if you are still staying in the city by this time tomorrow, then don't blame me for having no mercy." Having said that, she turned and left directly. Ling Han rubbed his nose. This woman was really overbearing. Who cares? Counter soldiers with arms and water with an earthweir. Manager Chen approached and softly asked, "Young Master Ling, should the Imperial Empress step in?" This person was definitely one of Shangji Wei's trusted aides. Would any ordinary person be qualified to have a direct audience with Shangji Wei? And hearing his tone, it seemed that he could see her whenever he wanted to. This kind of royal favor was really strong. Ling Han shook his head. "It's fine. Just let her be." "Young Master Ling, you must not be careless. Holy Daughter Enran is a first secret monarch tier, and though you are also extremely talented, you are only at the dividing soul tier. After all," Manager Chun continued. "Wouldn't I still have the help of Manager Chun in that case?" Ling Han asked smilingly. He did not know what Manager Chen's cultivation level was, but he had an instinctive feeling that his strength definitely had to be stronger than Enran's, and much stronger at that. Manager Chun had not thought that Ling Han would reply like this, and involuntarily faltered before breaking into a smile. This brat was really interesting. He did not have the arrogance that other monarch tiers had at all, not considering every other being beneath himself like them. If it was Lin Xian, he would definitely talk tough and say that he would resolve the matter himself. However, if he really made that choice, he would only be seeking his own suffering. Of course, Manager Chen would definitely not just sit by and watch, but he would only interfere when Ling Han was in life-threatening danger. However, with these words from Ling Han, it was definitely impossible that he would delay so long before interfering. Ling Han was clearly a super monarch tier, but did not have the common ailment of stubborn pride. That was good. Since young Master Ling has already said this, I naturally would not be sitting by and watching, Manager Chan said with a slight smile. He gestured for them to continue on their way. Young Master Ling, please. Manager Chun, please. Led by Manager Chun, Ling Han toured all over the Four Seas Palace. As for Four Seas City, he could not do the same. That was because it was too large. If he were really to take a tour around there, it could not be done without a few days' time. After his tour, Manager Chen arranged accommodations for Ling Han. The matters for tomorrow should be left for tomorrow. Ling Han couldn't bother himself to think too hard, either. With a flash, his figure had already entered the Black Tower. Even if there was only 1 day, he had no wish to waste it, either. At present, he had already opened the upper limits to his cultivation level, and urgently wished to break through to Heaven Soul, and after reaching Heaven Soul, he would not need to go to any mystery realm. He would be able to rapidly condense his 5th divided soul and aim for the true complete pinnacle of the dividing soul tier. Of course, he was presently still short of 1 source power of heaven and earth. Small tower, how awesome would it be to condense 9 divided souls? Ling Han asked. He was very curious about this aspect. Having 9 divided souls, just what kind of concept was that? 5th severance could match Yang Soul, so wouldn't dividing 9 souls be capable of killing even 5th secrets? You are overthinking things, Small Tower scoffed. It had never been one to spare anyone with its words. The gap between the dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier is too wide. Even if you condensed 8 divided souls, You could not possibly match Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han heard the hidden meaning in its words, which also means that dividing 9 souls would be able to match it. Finally, no longer so stupid, Small Tower said. Dividing 9 souls could match Immortal Palace tier, but that was only limited to the first secret of the Immortal Palace tier. Not only was the gap between the Immortal Palace tier and Dividing Soul tier extremely wide, the gap was wide as well between every minor level. I am only short of 1 source power of heaven and earth, Ling Han murmured. By now, he was not too far off from Heaven Soul, and his need of 9 source powers of heaven and earth had also suddenly become urgent. Small Tower did not say anything further. Ling Han focused hard on cultivation inside the Black Tower, and Hu Niu and the Empress were still attempting to collect the source power of heaven and earth. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ro and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were rather unoccupied. It was naturally extremely dull to just continue cultivating. One day in the outside world would be 1,000 days inside the Black Tower. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, feeling a sliver of improvement in his cultivation level. Ling Han. Right at this moment, Enrant's cold humph was heard from outside. Here she was. Ling Han walked out and saw that Enran had come in without an invitation. She stood in the middle of the courtyard, and there was actually a young man beside her as well. He bore a modest smile on his face, but every movement was showing his arrogance, showing that his modest display was actually just an act. You haven't scrammed, Enran declared coldly, appearing extremely displeased. I'm waiting for you to send me off, Ling Han said smilingly. Cheeky mouth. Enrant's beautiful eyes narrowed in a glare, and a terrifying pressure spread out like a tsunami. Enran, allow me. That young man stretched out his arm to hold her back, and his gaze turned on Ling Han, showing a strong contempt and dislike. Chapter 2140, Bet. Chapter 2140, Bet. This young man's name was Lin Xian. He was the spiritual mountain celestial king's disciple and was outstandingly talented. At present, his cultivation level was at first secret of Immortal Palace tier, and his battle prowess had reached 3rd secret of Immortal Palace tier. He was a noble, great monarch tier. This also filled him with brimming confidence, and he dared to court a prodigious woman like Enran. When he found out that Shang Jiwei had the intention to betroth Enran to Ling Han, he was naturally both furious and anxious. What right did Ling Han have? Lin Xian had courted Enran for so many years, and who in the entire Four Seas Palace did not know that? If Ling Han were to rob him of his woman, how would he be able to face others in the future? Moreover, it was very possible that Enran would inherit the position of Imperial Empress, which was also one of the reasons that he definitely could not give up. A brat that had popped out from who knew where actually dared to try and snatch his woman? He was seeking death. Of course, he only dared to just imagine killing Ling Han. This was a person that Shang Jiwei favored greatly. Otherwise, how could she want to marry Enran, whom she treated as her own daughter, to him? Thus, he did not dare do anything fatal to Ling Han at all, but just went along with Enran's thoughts on expelling Ling Han from Four Seas City. This naturally would be the best of both worlds. He would have won Enran's favor, and at the same time would not anger Shang Zai. Why expelling Ling Han was Enran's idea. Enran was disdainful of Ling Han, and hearing Lin Xian speak, she nodded. Ling Han was merely an earth soul, and should either herself or Lin Xian move, they would be able to deal with him in a couple of moves. You could have escaped unscathed, Lin Xian said. He strode forwards. But since you are so determined to seek your own humiliation, you can't blame anyone for it either. Without waiting for Ling Han to answer at all, he stretched out his hand to grab out at Ling Han. Young Master Lin, please be lenient. A black figure flashed past, stepping in front of Ling Han, and allowing Lin Xian's palm strike to approach. When it landed on his body, Lin Xian's whole palm was embedded into his body. That was Manager Chun. Though Lin Xian's whole hand had sunk into his chest, he seemed to have not realized this fact at all. There was no change to his tone of voice either. Ling Han had seen very clearly that Manager Chin's chest had turned into sand, and when this palm strike from Lin Xian landed, it had not hit anything solid, so it was naturally impossible that it would cause any kind of damage. This old geezer was definitely an ascending origin tier. A ninth heaven celestial king might not be able to lift someone else directly to the celestial king tier, but it should be no problem for the ascending origin tier. With how much Shang Jiwei trusted Manager Chen, even if he was just at first severance or second severance, she would still be able to forcefully boost his cultivation level to the ascending origin tier. Lin Xin frowned and asked, Elder Chen, why are you stopping me? There was a seventh heaven celestial king backing Lin Xin up, and he originally should not have to be so respectful towards an ascending origin tier and could directly address him by name. However, the person backing Manager Chen was Shang Jiwei, and he was very much trusted by her. With this, Lin Xin could only be extremely polite. To say nothing of him, even if the spiritual mountain celestial king was here, he would at the very least not simply issue commands to Manager Chen. Manager Chen chuckled. Young Master Ling is an honored guest of our Four Seas Palace, and thus I have the duty of protecting our honored guest. So please forgive me, young Master Lin. Lin Xin was immediately speechless. The other party had used major principles to suppress him, so how was he supposed to refute? Now it is a personal matter between me and him. And Ran was not willing to give in. Elder Chen, please do not interfere. Young miss, please do not make things difficult for me either. Manager Chen showed a troubled expression. Naturally, it was impossible that Ran would cross over Manager Chen and make a move on Ling Han. Thus, she only looked at Ling Han and said, when a man acts, he dares to take responsibility for his actions. To have another step up for you, do you not feel ashamed? Ling Han scratched his head, his expression simple and honest. You are an immortal palace tier, and I am only a dividing soul tier. How am I supposed to fight you? As long as you can parry a blow from me, I will temporarily allow you to stay here, Ran declared proudly. This naturally was not letting Ling Han off easy, but rather that she intended to seriously injure Ling Han with this strike, or even kill him. Afterwards, even if she would be reprimanded by Shang Jiwei, the latter would have nothing to say. In any case, with how much Ran was doted on, worst came to worst, she would be pelted with a harsh scolding. But for her to resign herself and marry Ling Han was an absolute impossibility. One strike. Ling Han hurriedly pretended to shake his head. The gap between the dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier is really too wide. To say nothing that you are a first secret monarch tier. Even if you were an ordinary first secret, I would still be killed by one strike from you. This brat was not stupid, Lin Xin thought from the sidelines. Unfortunately, he was really too greedy, or he should have known that Ran was definitely someone way beyond his station. The difference in strength between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier was like the difference between heaven and earth, and that was the same for their status. Perhaps Ling Han would only be capable of remaining in the dividing soul tier for his whole life, but Ran would at least be capable of becoming a fifth heaven celestial king, or could possibly even inherit Shang Jiwei's legacy and become the strongest ninth heaven celestial king in the celestial realm. Lin Xin did not know that there was still the heavenly venerable tier above ninth heaven celestial king tier. Only a very limited number of people knew this kind of secret. Even if you are outmatched, I still won't kill you, Ran said deliberately. Her aim was to coerce Ling Han into agreeing. Are you even a man? Ling Han purposely displayed an expression of anger. Who says I am not a man? Then, come and parry a strike from me. Fine. It seemed like Ling Han could no longer tolerate being spurred on, and agreed. Lin Xin immediately showed a disdainful expression. What an idiot, to completely lose his wits just with a few words. This kind of person was not worthy of his serious regard at all. He just had to scheme a little, and he would be able to easily get him killed. Meanwhile, Manager Chen was shocked. With how Ling Han had behaved yesterday, he was clearly a calm, steady person. How could he have been so easily angered? There was something off. However, Ling Han dragged out the word. I am no idiot. Why should I allow you to hit me when there is no benefit? Unless you agree that if I can parry a strike from you, you will give me a few celestial medicines. A few celestial medicines? Brat, you are really demanding an exorbitant price. Who do you think you are? Taking a hit, and that is worth a few celestial medicines? No problem. Unran agreed without the slightest hesitation. She was naturally being so straightforward because her killing intent was already spurred. She intended to kill Ling Han. Thus, no matter what kind of harsh conditions the latter demanded. So what? Ling Han was not so easily dismissed. He stretched out his hand. Then, we'll make this bet. Take out the stakes of the bet. I fear you would renege on the bet. Do you think I would renege on our bet? Unran was infuriated. She was the holy daughter of the Four Seas Palace, and also the most favored disciple of Xiao Gu. Her word was as good as gold, so how could she possibly break her word? In any case, if you don't take out the celestial medicines, I am not going to play. Ling Han's attitude was determined. Fine. Unran finally nodded. Spreading open her right hand, 3 celestial medicines lay in her palm. 7 million years, 30 million years plus, and 200 billion 50 million years. Ling Han swept a glance over and couldn't help but shake his head continuously. I say, do you think you are fooling a beggar here? Celestial medicines of this age cannot even be considered preliminary quality. Unran was involuntarily surprised. She had not thought that Ling Han's eyes were so sharp. He had just swept an eye over them, and he had clearly distinguished the age of the 3 celestial medicines. She gave Ling Han a second look, a feeling of alertness rising up in her heart. It can't be that this brat is a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? But upon further thought, she shook her head inwardly. No matter what, there was absolutely no way that a dividing soul tier could match an immortal palace tier, even if it was just parrying a strike. Moreover, she was a first secret monarch tier, her battle prowess directly soaring to the height of third secret. No matter how heaven-defying Ling Han was, it was useless. He would definitely be killed instantly with a strike. With another wave of her hand, 3 new celestial medicines appeared in her hand. Chapter 2141, Tricked. Chapter 2141, Tricked. Only then did Ling Han break into a smile. Finally, we have some sincerity. All right, I will take a blow from you. He first took over the celestial medicines from Unran's hands. If she refused, he would not begin the bet, either, so Unran could only give in. However, Unran was not concerned, either. In any case, once Ling Han died, she would be able to take back whatever she gave out. Are you done? Unran asked impatiently. She had never accommodated someone so much before. Even if there hadn't been the previous matter of betrothal, she would have felt an impulse to kill Ling Han. Sure, of course, Ling Han replied, laughing. Young Master Ling, Manager Chan spoke up. He knew Unran very well. She was definitely not betting with Ling Han for fun, but was rather going to take Ling Han's life without the slightest hesitation. Otherwise, she would not have been Unran. Thus, Manager Chan wanted to advise Ling Han not to do so. At a critical moment, he would even use brute force to forcibly take the other away and leave. Ling Han was a person that Xiao Gu had deliberately instructed that he had to take good care of, and no harm could be allowed to come to him. It's fine. Ling Han winked at Manager Chan. Manager Chan was inwardly surprised. In his impression, Ling Han was definitely not the type that would be so greedy to the point of risking his own life. What more when this was no longer a risk he was taking, but rather committing suicide? Why had Ling Han agreed to the battle? Could it be that he had some kind of special technique to deal with an immortal palace tier? Hesitating, Manager Chan took a step back and made no further attempt to stop them. And Ran moved. Boom! Her slender hand spread open, her fingers like mountains that enveloped Ling Han. Wong! Ling Han's figure trembled. The whole 30,000 meters of surrounding space warped to become multiple mirrors, and an image of Ling Han was placed in every single mirror. This, Unran couldn't help but falter. Which of them was Ling Han's true self? This move had indeed exceeded her expectations. Ling Han had actually grasped regulations of space, and was actually so skilled at them. Boom! The attack surged past, and the space mirrors shattered one after another. The Ling Hans within them were also naturally shattered by the impact, but there were still around 1/3 of space mirrors that were unscathed. As long as there was still one spiritual void manifestation, Ling Han's true self could freely switch with it. Thus, this blow naturally did not cause the slightest bit of damage to Ling Han. Ling Han smiled. "Thank you for the business. Please see yourself out." "You." And Ran was first taken aback, and then flew into an abrupt fury. She naturally knew that she had fallen for Ling Han's trick. This brat was really a wolf in sheep's clothing. He had obviously grasped the regulations of space and possessed a very strong survival ability, yet pretended to use all sorts of excuses, purposely inciting her to take out celestial medicines to use as stakes for their bet. Too devious, too cunning. Was this still a man? Meanwhile, Manager Chun was stroking his beard and smiling slightly. So it turned out that Ling Han had this kind of ability. No wonder he dared to accept such a bet. And Ran glared at Ling Han for a while, and then said, "Take another blow from me." Didn't you just say that I only have to take one blow?" Ling Han feigned shock. And Ran was indeed overbearing, but she was also proud at the same time. Hearing Ling Han's words, her face involuntarily reddened. With her status, she should not have made a move on a dividing soul tier, and now making a move once was not enough, and she actually wanted to do it a second time. This was too embarrassing. "Do you dare take another blow from me?" She could only continue to spur him on like this. Ling Han extended his hand, and then crooked a finger. "Take out another 3 celestial medicines, and they all have to be over 1 billion years in age." If the celestial medicine was over 1 billion years old, then even a dividing soul tier could use them. Of course, if it was 10 billion years or 100 billion years and above, that would definitely be even better. And Ran thought for a while. She had already seen this move from Ling Han, so it was definitely impossible that she would be deceived again. Fine, again. She took out another 3 celestial medicines, and they were all over 1 billion years in age. Only someone like her, a disciple of a 9th heaven celestial king, would be that wealthy. Ling Han accepted them happily, smiling widely, and stated, "Come on then." And Ran moved again. This time, she had directly used a celestial technique. A desolate aura surged out. It was as if she had become a great beast that originated from the ancient era. She only had to move slightly, and she would be capable of even shattering the heaven and earth. Having fallen for Ling Han's trick once, she set aside all her previous contempt and considered Ling Han as a real opponent. Boom! She sent out a punch. Instantly, the space was ripped apart, and the force endlessly spread out in all directions. In an instant, it had covered an area of 30,000 meters and was still spreading out continuously. Ling Han did not use the power of space, but rather took this blow head-on. Boom! The strike immediately landed solidly on him, and his figure was sent flying like he was a cannonball. However, and Ran, Manager Chun, and Lin Xian all showed expressions of shock at the same time. That was because though Ling Han had been sent flying, his body was completely undamaged. How was this possible? Taking such a terrifying blow, Ling Han should logically have been turned into pieces. How was it possible that he was practically unharmed? There were indeed some traces of blood at the corners of his lips, but this kind of injury was completely negligible. He was still who knew how far off from actual death. With a bang, Ling Han crashed heavily into a stone pillar, and his body was immediately stopped. Then, he slid back down, but before his body had landed completely on the ground, he had already stood up by himself. He had taken another blow, and he had done so with great ease. This was because he had directly channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, and for a short time, his defenses would be boosted to a terrifying extent. He would be able to easily take on even the full force blow of a first secret monarch tier. And Ran and the others were gaping widely, still in a state of deep shock and astonishment. Previously, though Ling Han had also parried a strike from Ran, it had been due to a stroke of cleverness, and he had not confronted Ran directly. However, it was completely different this time round. Ling Han had sustained a blow head-on, and it was a blow with full force from Ran at that. Awesome to the extreme. With this strike, there was nothing Ran could say or complain about. However, she became even more infuriated. You obviously had that kind of strength, but why had you not used it during the first time? This guy was clearly wanting to scam her for her celestial medicines. Realization suddenly dawned on her. This guy that looked to be slightly dumb was instead a prodigy. He had deliberately lured her into the trap, tricking her twice for her celestial medicines. Had she ever been tricked before? There was definitely no such instance. Firstly, no one would dare, and secondly, with her prodigious genius, who could successfully trick her? Yet now, one such person had appeared. He had not only tricked her, he had done it twice. Unran was angered to the point of madness. However, she had no choice but to be impressed by Ling Han's strength. This guy was really outrageously bold, and he did indeed have heaven-defying techniques. Even she had to admit that she was impressed. Good, good, good. She said the word 3 times. Even if she was angered to the point of wanting to commit murder, she could not bring herself to make another move on Ling Han. If she were to move on a dividing soul tier 3 times consecutively, her pride would not allow that. She turned and left. At least for the moment, she could not possibly come again to deal with Ling Han. Meanwhile, Lin Xian looked longer at Ling Han before turning around and leaving as well. He had already tagged Ling Han as a powerful enemy that he had to get rid of. His display was too heaven-defying. If he broke through again to the Immortal Palace tier, then wouldn't he be completely unmatched? Young Master Ling, very well done, Manager Chen said, smiling widely, and even gave Ling Han a thumbs up. Ling Han smiled slightly. Manager Chen is too polite. This junior just has thick skin and coarse flesh. Manager Chen only smiled in response. Ling Han was both brave and smart. It was nothing as simple as just having heaven-defying defenses. Furthermore, he dared to even trick Holy Daughter and ran. In the Four Seas Palace, this was definitely the first time it happened. Chapter 2142. Reaching Heaven Soul Quietly. Chapter 2142. Reaching Heaven Soul Quietly. Ling Han settled down in the Four Seas Palace. Every day, he would be studying Great Tao, and at the same time would also be concocting alchemical pills. Shang Jiwei had very good patience. She had been alive for who knew how many epochs, so she naturally did not mind waiting 8 to 10 years, or even several 100 billion years. She would have this kind of patience naturally because she took Ling Han as her own son/nephew. Otherwise, she would have just killed him and been done with it. However, it was also not realistic for Ling Han to leave Four Seas City. Shang Jiwei would definitely not allow him to leave before he handed over Hunyo. Thus, he could only cultivate and improve his skill in alchemy. In the blink of an eye, 7 years had already passed. 7 years had passed in the outside world, and with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, as long as 7,000 years had passed, and the time spent comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree was even more overwhelmingly long, and added with how Shang Jiwei doted on him, she would deliver all kind of precious cultivation resources to him, causing his cultivation level to soar all the way to the pinnacle of Earth Soul. Ling Han estimated that if he had not had Shang Jiwei's support, he would only have been able to reach this level in over 1,000 years. Even the Black Tower was not omnipotent. From this, it was also clear that Shang Jiwei was really treating him like her own son, which also caused Ling Han a headache. In the future, if Hunyo were to become enemies with Shang Jiwei, he would definitely be on Hunyo's side, but if he was to step in to deal with Shang Jiwei, that would be really too ungrateful. Whatever, he'd put the matter aside for now. The Rock Palace possessed Yang Soul Ocean, Earth Soul Mountain, and the sort, so considering the Four Seas Palace was its equal, would they also have this kind of mystery realm? Of course they would. Thus, when Ling Han reached peak stage Earth Soul, he went to the Heaven Soul Pool to break through. Merely a month later, he had reached consummate level and successfully advanced to Heaven Soul tier, catching up with Hunyo, the Empress, and the others in cultivation level. And another piece of good news came. The Empress and Hunyo had subdued the source power of heaven and earth at about the same time. They managed to succeed firstly because their own natural talent in cultivation was extremely high, and they were qualified to subdue source powers of heaven and earth, and secondly because the Black Dragon King had used a secret technique to weaken the resistance of the source power of heaven and earth, thus allowing the two women to succeed easily. Otherwise, even a celestial king would need tens of millions of years to collect a source power of heaven and earth. Even with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, the two women had only spent more than 10,000 years. Ling Han. Hunyao pounced into Ling Han's arms, greedily sniffing the scent that belonged solely to him. Niu missed you to death. No slight distraction could take place when collecting a source power of heaven and earth. Otherwise, not only would all previous efforts be completely wasted, the source power of heaven and earth would also abandon you and leave. This was always only a one-time opportunity. Thus, Hunyao could only suppress her nature earlier. For her, this was really not very easily done. Ling Han laughed loudly and spun around 3 times where he stood while hugging Hunyao. The Empress also pounced. She looked down proudly on the world and would directly express any fondness she felt. She would not pay any regard to the thoughts of others. Ling Han also embraced the Empress and felt as if embracing these two women in his arms was like embracing the whole world, and his heart also became incredibly steadfast. He would definitely safeguard this happiness. Niu is going out to play. Hunyao acted spoiled in Ling Han's arms for a while, and then couldn't help but call out. She had a playful nature, and she had been in seclusion for over 10,000 years continuously this time. She naturally felt suffocated. Ling Han's expression changed lightly. Shaking his head, he said, "Niu, you won't be able to leave here for the moment." "Why?" Hunyao's expression was filled with curiosity. Ling Han sighed, and after slight hesitation, he told her the truth about how the Rock Palace had already been destroyed by the Four Seas Palace. "Wah, that despicable old witch, Niu will kill her." After Hunyao heard this, she was immediately howling in anger. Indeed, she had not liked how long Yuexi would interfere in all her matters, but after so many years, she had naturally developed very strong affections for Long Yuexi, just like how a mischievous granddaughter would feel towards her grandmother. She was not so concerned about the destruction of the Rock Palace, but Long Yuexi's death still made her extremely furious. She wanted to leap out of the Black Tower and seek out Shangji Wei for vengeance. Ling Han naturally would not agree. The other party was just worrying if Hunyao was going to appear. Going out would really mean just delivering herself to her doorstep. He continuously comforted and eased her anxiety. The Empress also put aside their old grudges and gave Hunyao a few words of advice, and added with bewitching Maiden Ro and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden who had come later, the 4 of them finally managed to temporarily convince Hunyao. Niu is going to cultivate. Niu is going to become a heavenly venerable tier, then beat up that old witch. Hunyao declared, her eyes red. This little girl had never liked cultivation, but now she was actually announcing such a declaration, which showed how sorrowful and furious she was. Ling Han nodded. If Hunyao could focus her grief on cultivation, that would be good, but hopefully, this matter would not have any effects on the little girl's personality and turn an originally optimistic person into a tool that only knew revenge. He exited the Black Tower and went into a daze. 7 years had passed, and though Shangji Wei had still not forced him before, he had not found any means of leaving at all. It was like he would only be able to escape and leave when he advanced to Celestial King tier, and was qualified to match Shangji Wei in speed. What was he going to do? If Hunyao could not leave the Black Tower, then it would be forever impossible for her to break through to the Immortal Palace tier. How could that be allowed? Pong, pong, pong. Just as he was feeling troubled, a knock sounded at the doors. There had been countless people who had visited him throughout these 7 years. She was presently the most important person in Shangji Wei's eyes. Everyone wanted to develop amicable relations with him. However, he had been constantly cultivating in seclusion, so others could only be left out in the cold. And now, here was a visitor. Ling Han naturally would not be surprised. He had initially wanted to enter into the Black Tower, but thinking that since he was presently stuck in a dilemma anyways, he might as well find someone he could chat with and find distraction from his troubles. He went to open the doors and saw a young man standing in the doorway. When he saw Ling Han, he immediately clasped his hands in greeting and said, "My name is Fu He, and I am Lord Lin Xin's follower." Greetings, young Master Ling, one of Lin Xian's men. Ling Han naturally did not bear any positive feelings for Lin Xian, but as the saying went, one would not hit someone who smiled at you. He could not bother himself to show his displeasure to just one of his underlings, either. Thus, he smiled and asked, "What is it?" "It's like this. A mystery realm has been newly discovered in the wide change heaven, attracting a great many prodigies and elites to adventure there. Lord Lin Xian and Lady Unran have both decided to journey there." Fu He showed a very humble attitude. "Lord Lin Xian has commanded me to come and ask if young Master Ling would be interested to go with them." Of course he was, but how could Shang Wei actually release him? Moreover, would Lin Xian really be that kind? He was probably planning on making a move on him in the mystery realm. Ling Han smiled slightly. "If Lin Xian can convince Aunt Wei, I would indeed like to take a look." The spiritual mountain celestial king still has some influence on the Lady Imperial Empress. Since young Master Ling wishes to go, then Lord Lin Xian would naturally ask the spiritual mountain celestial king to step out and put the suggestion forward to Lady Imperial Empress, Fu He said. Ling Han was surprised. As a great, noble celestial king, one that was at seventh heaven at that, he would actually be willing to deliberately make a trip for the sake of a minor dividing soul tier like him. It looked like the spiritual mountain celestial king was very meticulous when it came to the matters of his disciple, as well if he would actually come out in the open and create a chance for his disciple to kill him. However, if they were really able to leave the Four Seas Palace, Ling Han would really like to grab this opportunity. He had the Black Tower, and this should only be known to Shang Wei. Even the spiritual mountain celestial king did not know about the karmic life heavenly venerable. The matter actually progressed extraordinarily smoothly. A mere 3 days later, Manager Chun passed on a message from Shang Wei that he was to decide for himself whether to go to this mystery realm or not. And if he was going, there would be many dangers in the mystery realm, so he had to be extremely cautious. Chapter 2143, Another Familiar Person. Chapter 2143, Another Familiar Person. Naturally, Ling Han chose to go. Thus, when Manager Chun brought the message back from Ling Han, Shang Wei deliberately summoned both him and Unran. She did not speak of the matter of Hun Yo at all, and merely reminded them to be especially careful, as benevolent as a mother. This caused Unran to clench her fists in anger. Initially, this had been concern and love that she enjoyed alone, yet now she had to share it with Ling Han, which made it very hard for her to accept. "Fine, you have snatched what belongs to me, and I will definitely make you suffer after we enter into the mystery realm," she internally swore. Unran, Shang Wei suddenly looked towards her. "Master," Unran hurriedly half-knelt. "I'll entrust Ling Han to you. You must not let any harm come to him," Shang Wei said sternly. How could she be ignorant of this disciple's personality? Thus, she directly gave her forewarning. "Ah." Unran's mouth gaped half open. With her personality, if she were to agree, it would be absolutely impossible that she wouldn't keep her promise. Otherwise, how would she be able to call Shang Wei her master again? However, to ask her to tolerate Ling Han for the whole journey and have to guarantee his safety at the same time, how could she accept that? And Shang Wei's slender brows furrowed in a slight frown. "Yes, master." Unran nodded reluctantly. Only now did Shang Wei break into a smile. She glanced at Ling Han, then turned to look at Unran, and felt that this was really a match made in heaven, causing her to involuntarily recall how she and the karmic life heavenly venerable would have been in their youth, if that be asterisk Tianyun had not appeared. Involuntarily, her killing intent blazed. Boom! Multiple depressions appeared in the palace. A storm surged out from the void, but was immediately sliced to pieces by her killing intent. When a ninth heaven celestial king raged, even the heaven and earth would be moved. "Go on." She waved them off. Ling Han and Unran quickly left, firstly because they both had thoughts on their minds, and secondly because a ninth heaven celestial king was angered, and the pressure was too heavy to stay beside her. After some slight preparations, Ling Han and the rest then set out. This time, it was the spiritual mountain celestial king leading them, It was just a few juniors going off to adventure in a mystery realm. So why was there any need to mobilize a seventh heaven celestial king? This naturally was due to Shang Jiwei's high regard. Whether it was in Ran or Ling Han, she considered them both as her own children and naturally would not allow anything bad to happen to either of them. However, there had initially been no need for the spiritual mountain celestial king to step out for this matter personally, yet he took the initiative to take this job, so it was naturally impossible that Shang Jiwei would refuse. Thus, the spiritual mountain celestial king scooped up the three young people and directly tore a rip into space, setting out towards the wide change heaven. A mere 5 days later, he stopped. They had already arrived at the wide change heaven. The spiritual mountain celestial king's figure slowed and slowly advanced with the three juniors. However, celestial kings had heaven-defying power. Ling Han was obviously just using normal speed to travel, yet he still did not fall back behind in Ran and Lin Xian, far surpassing the speed that he could reach. In truth, Lin Xian and Enran's speed was also faster than their usual rate. This was because the spiritual mountain celestial king had boosted them with a certain celestial technique, yet they did not feel anything at all, as if this was very normal. In this way, they had only spent another day to arrive at the location of that mystery realm. Ling Han's expression became strange because he knew this place. It was not that he had been here before, but rather that he had seen it on a map. After he had won the first place in the Alchemy tournament, the prize was an ancient map, and it was said that there was a several hundred billion years old celestial medicine hidden in the location where the hidden treasure was shown on the map, and it was within this mystery realm. What a coincidence! This mystery realm had only appeared not too long ago. Initially, this had been a sea, but in the last few years, the sea waters rapidly evaporated, revealing a gigantic pit. Then, the pit cracked apart, revealing another world. Ling Han deliberately swept a glance over the ancient map and discovered that there should have been a transference portal that could allow entry, but some unknown change had taken place, causing the sea waters to evaporate and the mystery realm to reveal itself. In the skies, multiple figures streaked past, flying into the mystery realm. Ling Han looked down from his lofty position and saw that incredibly tall trees spread as far as the eye could see. They were several thousand meters tall, and the tree leaves were thick and wide, considerably larger than even the average house. And the roars of tigers and howls of wolves could vaguely be heard from beneath them. There were also birds flying out from within. Some directly flew far away, while others would fly in a circle and then return into the mystery realm. This is a place that has been lost since the ancient age. The spiritual mountain celestial king's eyes closed slightly, his right hand making a divination beneath his sleeve. A while later, his eyes snapped open, showing an expression of surprise. The celestial realm had existed for who knew how many epochs, but people universally called what was 10 epochs ago the ancient age, and what was 100 epochs ago would be called the primitive age. Though the spiritual mountain celestial king had attained Tao many years ago, he had only been alive for over 2 epochs, and compared to the celestial realm, that was naturally negligible. It was said that a super great war had erupted before both in the ancient age and primitive age, and a great many celestial kings had died, even ninth heaven celestial kings. Thus, when something was connected with the ancient age, even he, a seventh heaven celestial king, would be tempted. Who knew? There might be a treasure that had been left after the death of a ninth heaven celestial king that would lend him a helping hand and help him to break through to eighth heaven. Brother spiritual mountain. A cry rang out, and a man with a thin, lanky build flew down towards them. Brother great clouds. When the spiritual mountain celestial king saw him, he offered him a smile and even nodded in response. This thin man's body was wrapped with 8-colored celestial light, showing that he was an 8th heaven celestial king. Why would an 8th heaven celestial king be willing to treat the spiritual mountain celestial king as an equal? Naturally, it was because the spiritual mountain celestial king's battle prowess was too strong, and there was a place for him even among 8th heaven celestial kings. The great cloud celestial king waved a hand, and 5 young people instantly appeared by his side. These were the juniors that he had brought along with him, using a celestial technique. Ling Han. One of the juniors spotted Ling Han and uncontrollably called out. Ling Han naturally spotted him as well, and a rueful feeling involuntarily rose up in him. This world was actually quite small. Yulan Fenghua, the holy son of the Imperial Void Sect. Going by that account, this great cloud celestial king should be a member of the Imperial Void Sect then. So it is Brother Yulan, Ling Han replied with a smile. Meanwhile, Yulan Fenghua's expression was filled with shock. Previously, he had battled Ling Han, and the outcome was a tie, but Ling Han's cultivation level was lower than his by a minor level, causing his menacing, killing intent to rise. He had deliberately chatted with the other party just to probe into Ling Han's background. He could confirm that Ling Han was just a lone cultivator, albeit one with heaven-defying good luck, and that was why he would have been so accomplished in cultivation. Thus, he extended an invitation to Ling Han, inviting him to the Imperial Void Sect. There, he would be able to play Ling Han easily to death. But now he had actually seen Ling Han again, and the latter was actually with the members of the Four Seas Palace. He was a member of the Four Seas Palace. He had never heard about someone like him in the Four Seas Palace. Who was this little boy, to actually be acquainted with our holy son Yulan? The great cloud celestial king swept over him and deliberately voiced the question. That was because he was very familiar with Yulan Fenghua, and he had never seen the latter look so stunned. At least in front of a peer of equal cultivation levels, both Ling Han and Yulan Fenghua were heaven souls. Just a mere junior. The spiritual mountain celestial king sketched over the details. If Ling Han had a grudge with the Imperial Void Sect, he would not mind using them to get Ling Han killed. Thus, it was naturally impossible that he would reveal the relationship between Ling Han and Shang Jiwei. Unran was presently angry, so she naturally would not help Ling Han explain, and it was even more so for Lin Xian. Chapter 2144, Insect Sting. Chapter 2144, Insect Sting. I had never thought that this place was actually a lost land from the ancient age. The great cloud celestial king spoke the same words as the spiritual mountain celestial king. This eight-truth spiritual beast should have long since gone extinct, right? I never imagined that I would be able to see it again here. He extended a hand carelessly, and as origin power surged, a massive beast was instantly grabbed by a colossal eight-colored hand. No matter how hard it struggled, it was all wasted effort, and when it had been dragged in front of these two celestial kings, it was so scared that its tail was tightly clamped between its legs. In front of this kind of high-level celestial king, no matter how untamable and wild it would still instinctively feel fear. A celestial king represented the heaven and earth. Indeed, these 8 celestial patterns have been infused with 8 kinds of regulations of heaven and earth. The spiritual mountain celestial king waved a hand, and an extremely complex seal immediately appeared on that massive beast. Though the original 8-truth spiritual beast has not advanced into 9th heaven, with these 8 celestial patterns, it still practically conquered all its peers of 8th heaven. Ling Han heard this, and then sensed for himself. Involuntarily, he nodded inwardly. At present, he possessed 8 source powers of heaven and earth, but these 8 regulations were the closest to their source, so he was also most sensitive towards these 8 regulations. He could sense that there were 5 regulations on that seal that could resonate with him. Once the 8-truth spiritual beast advanced into severing mundane tier, it would grasp 8 regulations, so its battle prowess was definitely incredibly strong, and it would be a cinch for it to suppress all its peers. Initially, I had only made this trip on a spontaneous impulse due to extreme boredom, but I never thought that I would discover a lost land from the ancient age. The great cloud celestial king casually tossed the 8-truth spiritual beast away, and this giant beast hurriedly broke into a run and fled. It was practically scared out of its wits. Who knows what great fortune there would be, the spiritual mountain celestial king stated calmly, but there was a dominance in his tone that spoke of willingness to battle the heaven and earth itself. This was a way of expression and also a kind of confidence. Even if the other was an eighth heaven celestial king, he would not give in to him or fear him. Let the juniors go for their adventure while we take a walk. All right? The great cloud celestial king asked, smiling. Sure. The spiritual mountain celestial king immediately accepted. With him and the great cloud celestial king, how would Ling Han and the rest be able to die? With a wave of his hand, the great cloud celestial king sent the 5 juniors by his side into the mystery realm, and the spiritual mountain celestial king also waved his hand and delivered Ling Han and the others inside. They were practically right next to Yulan Fenghua and his group. The 2 celestial kings laughed and strode off. Their target was a tall peak that pierced through the clouds in the distance. There were divine clouds immersing the skies and possessed a primitive air. Ling Han understood inwardly. The reason that the spiritual mountain celestial king had escorted them here was not just to ensure the safety of their group, but also for the purpose of monitoring him, naturally for Hunyo's sake. How could Shangji Wei possibly let him go so easily? And now that the spiritual mountain celestial king had left, both Ran and Lin Xian should be taking over this duty then. In fact, the spiritual mountain celestial king still had a sliver of thought following him. Hunyo only had to appear, and this thread of thought would immediately take form and capture Hunyo. Even a thread of thought from a celestial king could suppress ascending origin tier, and this was an unquestionable fact. Ling Han still could not let Hunyo out now, and had to find a chance to flee. He had no intention of returning to Four Seas City. Holy Daughter Ran, Brother Lin Xian, Yulan Fenghua, and the others all greeted Ran and Lin Xian. Previously, all of them appeared slightly reserved in the presence of celestial kings. Among these 5 of them, aside from Yulan Fenghua, who was still a heaven soul, the other 4 had all advanced into the immortal palace tier, and were the other holy sons and holy daughter of the Imperial Void sect. However, 4 of these were men, with only one that was a woman. Lin Xian and Ran clearly knew them and greeted them back. This is... The man named Ai Kaifeng looked towards Ling Han and showed an expression of ponderment. Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. Ai Kaifeng responded with a reserved smile, though a hint of disdain was revealed in the corners of his lips. He was a first secret monarch tier, while the other was only a heavenly emperor. The gap in strength between the 2 of them was like the gap between heaven and earth, so he naturally disdained even talking to Ling Han. This would degrade his own status. He was not the only one, for the other 3 were the same. Their names were Lao Liang, Bi Ziwen, and Di Tongxin, respectively. They merely conversed cordially with Lin Xian and Ran, but did not cast a second look at Ling Han. The truth was the fact that they even bothered to ask Ling Han's name was already giving him enough credit. Neither Ran nor Lin Xian had the intention to explain who Ling Han was. The 8 of them set out and began walking in the forest. They were not celestial kings, so how could they possibly dare to act rash in this land from the ancient age and fly in the air without restraint? This dense forest was very dark, and the great trees were several thousand meters tall, with large, dense, thick leaves that blocked all light. Thankfully, they were all at the dividing soul tier at the very least, so this was naturally not much of a problem. Aya! Bi Ziwen suddenly exclaimed and stopped walking. What is it? Lao Liang asked. Bi Ziwen raised his leg and saw that blood was actually dripping from his foot. Everyone was stunned. Though they had not encountered enemies yet, having come to such a place, who would dare be careless? They would all definitely have covered their bodies with origin power, but Bi Ziwen had actually bled for no reason, which both confused and shocked them. What's going on? Bi Ziwen removed his sock and shoe, and saw that there was actually an insect sting stabbing into the sole of his left foot, exuding an eerily blue luster. It was just an insect sting, and had not been actively used. Bi Ziwen had only stepped on it, and it had actually pierced through his shoe and sock, and penetrated his defense of origin power and regulations, stabbing into the sole of foot. 2. Bi Ziwen's body suddenly trembled, as if he was in a sudden seizure. His eyes rolled upwards, and there was white foam gushing from the corners of his lips. Oh no, this insect sting is poisonous. With who they all were, they immediately guessed the reason. This was too terrifying, wasn't it? A great, noble immortal palace tier elite actually could not block an insect's sting that had been broken off, and the strong poison had entered his body, further causing a monarch tier like Bziwen to be unable to resist it at all. Laoyang and the others quickly took out antidote alchemical pills and forced them into Bziwen. Not long after, Bziwen finally calmed down, but he had also passed out, releasing very deep breathing sounds. At the very least, they had finally suppressed the poison. As expected of a lost land from the ancient age, where there is danger at every step, AI Kaifeng felt lingering fear. He, Laoyang, and Di Tongxin were all first secret monarch tiers like Bziwen. Since Bziwen had been struck, then they definitely could not be spared, either. However, they were luckier and had not stepped on that broken insect sting. But who knew if there would be other insect stings or something similar in this place? Meanwhile, Ling Han glanced at Bziwen and stated, "There is something off with his condition. It does not seem like the poison has been dispelled." "What do you know?" AI Kaifeng immediately retorted. He had just spoken, and Ling Han replied like this. Wasn't that just purposely undermining him? The highest change antidote pill senior brother B ingested had been personally concocted by the 4-star Grandmaster Zhong Qi, capable of easily curing all poisons beneath Celestial King tier. N. Both Laoyang and Di Tongxin nodded in unison. They naturally were absolutely trusting and reassured about Grandmaster Zhong Qi. Ling Han's mouth twitched, and he did not speak any further. He was also a 4-star Grandmaster, all right? But since these three people did not appreciate his kindness, there was no need for him to be snubbed despite his good intentions. In any case, he was not very close with Bziwen either, nor did they have any kind of relations. So what business was it of his whether the other man lived or died? Bziwen suddenly opened his mouth and released a strange sound. It sounded like it had been forced out from a dead tree. When everyone's attention was drawn to him, Bziwen's eyes suddenly snapped open. The whites of his eyes had become blue, while his pupils had become deathly pale, looking horrifyingly eerie. Chapter 2145, Corroded Corpse. Chapter 2145, Corroded Corpse. The poison has really not been cured. Lin Xian deliberately laughed. Ling Han was right. Hearing these words from him, AI Kaifeng and their group were naturally very displeased about him, but more of their antagonism was directed at Ling Han. Well, it was he that had indeed spoken such words. Naturally, the four of them thought that he was the villain. Ling Han glanced at Lin Xian. This man was really a poisonous being. This was a move to deliberately draw animosity towards him. Bziwen was moaning louder and louder, and then suddenly jumped to his feet in a bounce. His posture was extremely weird, his legs not bending, and he was just standing there as erect as a wooden stick. A spine-chilling aura exuded from those eerily pale eyes. His gaze was focused on Laoyang, and he suddenly pounced over, opening his mouth and directing a bite at the latter's throat. "Brother B, have you gone mad?" Laoyang hurriedly retreated. It was as if Bziwen had indeed gone mad, his mouth releasing groans that could not be heard clearly as he continued to bite fiercely at Laoyang. The poison in senior brother B's body has not been dispersed. It would be useless to try convincing him. We have to capture him. AI Kaifeng called out and was the first to make his move. Laoyang and Di Tongxin also moved quickly, suppressing Bziwen together, while Yulan Fenghua was only standing on the sidelines and watching the show. Though he was esteemed as the strongest holy son in the history of Imperial Void Sect, limited by his cultivation level, this was above his pay grade. The three moved together and attacked Bziwen in unison. However, their cultivation levels and strength were close and similar with Bziwen, so how could it be any easy matter to capture the latter? The present Bziwen did not have any consciousness at all, and was only aware of opening his mouth and biting others. He did not recognize anyone, and had no scruples, but AI Kaifeng and the others did not dare attack him too severely. In this manner, even if they had an advantage in numbers, the advantage would be cancelled out. Brother Lin Xian, holy daughter and Ran, please help us. Di Tongxin requested assistance. Lin Xian looked towards and ran, and the latter nodded. The two of them immediately moved, joining the battle. They were much less reserved in their attacks. So what if they wounded Bziwen severely? He could slowly recuperate after this. AI Kaifeng and their group could not attack conveniently, and thus did not stop and ran and Lin Xian. On the contrary, they were responsible for restraining Bziwen's attacks so that Ran and Lin Xian could go all out and attack freely. Ling Han was bored and watched the show, his arms crossed over his chest. I had never really thought that Brother Ling would actually be a member of the Four Seas Palace. Yulan Fenghua walked over, shaking his head, and bringing a hint of rebuke in his expression. Brother Ling, you are really too unfriendly, hiding even this from me. Ling Han chuckled. It's a long story, and cannot be summed up in a few words. In brief, I had not deliberately meant to deceive Brother Yulan. Yulan Fenghua also smiled, his gaze flickering slightly. He was measuring his losses and gains. If he moved and got Ling Han killed, just how much trouble would it cause for himself? He thought for a moment, and an idea suddenly came to him. There was no need for him to personally move. He could borrow the help of those 4 senior brothers and senior sister. He was sure that AI Kaifeng and the others were already quite displeased with Ling Han by now. Right. This had been stirred up by Lin Xian as well. Could it be that there was internal conflict within the Four Seas Palace? This could be exploited. On the other side, the 5 great monarch tiers moving together finally suppressed Bziwen. After all, the present Bziwen did not have any intelligence and knew only to attack, so it was definite that his battle prowess would be greatly reduced. Each of the 5 great monarch tiers placed a restriction on Bziwen. In this way, unless Bziwen's strength was superior to their combined strength, it would be completely impossible for him to break out of these restrictions. Every step is thorny, they exclaimed ruefully. They had not even taken that many steps, and already one of their numbers was down. Just how dangerous was this mystery realm? After stowing Bziwen away into a spatial god tool, the 7 of them continued their journey. This time, they had learned their lesson, keeping their feet elevated about 1 foot from the ground. In this way, there would be no need to fear that something like that insect sting would stab into the soles of their feet. They were not walking very quickly, and not long after, 9 fallen bodies appeared abruptly ahead of them. They're all dead. Judging by the extent of decomposition, they've been dead for at least several billion years. That's not right. Hasn't this mystery realm just been discovered? Furthermore, it's a lost land from the ancient age at that. How could there possibly be a corpse that is just several billion years old? They exchanged looks and thought that there was a strangeness about this that could not be described. Could it be that several billion years ago, someone has already entered this place? That's right. It is not definite that a mystery realm has to be fully open to allow entry. In the first place, it was already here. Someone must have accidentally barged into this space, though not a single person managed to leave alive, and that was why this place has never been discovered all this while. Logically, this could be explained. The 7 people nodded. This should be the most logical explanation. The corpses have not been touched. Judging from the look of things, internal strife should have happened among the 9 of them, and they killed each other. They continued their deductions. It is also possible that they belonged to 2 different sides, and just happened to encounter one another here, which was followed by the outbreak of battle. That's also possible. There was naturally nothing much to see about the corpses. The 7 of them very quickly resumed their advance, but they had just taken a few steps when Lao Liang suddenly exclaimed in shock, and then turned around and backtracked. What is it? Everyone hurriedly followed him. Not long later, Lao Liang had already returned to where the 9 corpses were laid out. He began to flip over a body, and he found a jade pendant on that body. He carefully examined it for a while, and an expression of astonishment appeared on his face. Senior brother Lao, what is it? AI Kaifeng asked. At first, Lao Liang did not speak. After a while, he replied, I know this person. His name is Yu Kaiqing. He waved that jade pendant. And I have been the one to gift this to him too. What? Everyone was incredibly stunned by these words, and an intense coldness rose up in them. It should be known that Lao Liang's flame of life had only been burning for around 700 to 800 million years, but these corpses were at least several billion years old. In that case, how would Lao Liang have known this Yuexi? Was he seeing things? Senior brother Lao, are you sure that this person is indeed Yuexi? Di Tongxin asked. Perhaps. Yuexi has also come here, and something happened, causing him to leave his jade pendant on this corpse? That's right. It's horribly corroded, and there is completely no way to distinguish the facial features. Lao Liang shook his head. The jade pendant has not been dropped on this corpse, but was hidden on this corpse. Hence, this person must definitely be Yuexi. Could it be that it was impossible that you have mistaken the jade pendant? These words were the doubt in everyone's mind, but no one spoke it out loud. Since Lao Liang was already so sure, mentioning such words would be equivalent to slapping him in the face. Ling Han took 2 steps forwards and carefully examined the 9 corpses. Previously, they had only been rummaging through the spatial god tools of these 9 people. There weren't any treasures inside. However, Ling Han placed his focus on their wounds this time. Insect sting. Ling Han discovered a wound on the sole of the foot of one of them, where a gleaming blue insect sting was sticking out. Everyone muttered, "Eee." It was an insect sting again. Could it be that this person had lost his senses due to the poison, and then killed all of his 8 companions, and ultimately died from the poison himself? Lao Liang continued, over 200 years ago, I even met Yuexi once. His words incited even more shock from the others. Could it be that Yuexi has also just entered this place and died not too long ago? The natural environment here is unusual, causing a corpse that has only died several years or even several days ago to decompose so badly. Right at this moment, a corpse suddenly released a weird groan, exactly like how Bi Ziwen had done previously. Chapter 2146, Alive. Chapter 2146, Alive. They were really seeing things. Everyone showed an alert expression and took a few steps back as they looked towards that corpse whose foot had been wounded. It was precisely this corpse that had released that unusual groan. Tong. This corpse suddenly stood upright, its knees straight, looking incredibly bizarre. This corpse said nothing and immediately directed a bite at Yulan Fenghua. Yulan Fenghua was just about to move when his face paled in shock. He hurriedly retreated because the other party was far stronger than himself. Humph! AI Kaifeng smirked coldly and moved to parry the attack. Pong! This blow from him was too terrifying. The corpse was immediately sent flying from the force. Pong! 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 It crashed through at least several hundred giant trees on its course, and only then did it finally stop. However, it had not sustained any injuries at all. Immediately, it charged back with a bounce like a sharp arrow. This time, it was AI Kaifeng that was looking surprised. This corpse should have been only a first secret king tier when it had been alive, and now that it was dead, its battle prowess would have become weaker. And he was a first secret mystical power, and should logically have been able to destroy this corpse with a single blow. Yet that was not what had happened. He had sent this corpse flying. It was completely no match for him, but its physique was astonishingly strong, and actually stayed undamaged. Strange, very strange. There was something strange about everything in this place. It was obvious that they had been dead for only 200 years at most, yet the decomposition of the corpses had reached an extent as if they had been dead for several billion years. And now, though the person was dead, the strength of his physique was off the charts. The extent of strangeness could not be described. That corpse charged towards them, its hands spread open. Its fingernails were long and sharp, and it turned and clawed out at AI Kaifeng. Ignorance. AI Kaifeng smirked coldly. His strength was superior to the other by who knew how many times over, and it actually dared to attack him. Pong, pong, pong. AI Kaifeng moved aggressively, and every blow sent that corpse flying and bouncing as if it was just a sandbag that was being beaten. But what incited fear was the fact that no matter how AI Kaifeng attacked it, this corpse was still undamaged, as if it had been refined into divine metal. Ling Han and the others were all wondering, could it be that this person had focused on cultivating his physique when he had been alive? Otherwise, he had only been dead for a mere 200 years at most, so he couldn't have turned into a zombie so fast, right? But that was not definite, because this corpse seemed to have decomposed for several 100 billion years, so any kind of strange change would have been logical. It should be linked to the poison, Ling Han deduced. This poison could cause one to lose his reason and commit mindless slaughter, but perhaps it could also have a great effect on the corpse after death, such that it would become indestructible. Can we capture him and study him carefully? Lin Xian suggested. Though they still held another victim of the poison captive, Ziwen clearly could not be dissected for study, so they could only take this corpse for examination. Easy, AI Kaifeng declared proudly. The gap in battle prowess between both sides was like a gulf. It was one matter for him to be incapable of killing the other party, but it would be incredibly easy to capture it. His hands danced, and multiple streaks of light flowed out from the tips of his fingers. Celestial light diffused, and an indescribable might exuded. He had used a celestial technique, so his battle prowess was immediately different. He aggressively suppressed it, and that corpse very soon lay subdued on the ground. It could only chaotically struggle with its arms, yet could not stand up at all. Ah! Di Tongxin suddenly grabbed her head, her eyes shedding tears of blood. What's wrong? Everyone hurriedly asked in shock. I used my divine sense to enter into this corpse, yet did not expect that there is an indescribable darkness lying within. The evil power has directly eradicated that sliver of my divine sense. Di Tongxin's pretty face was shockingly pale, and she looked endearingly pitiful. So powerful? Everyone was stunned. The battle prowess of this corpse was not all that strong, or it would not have been so easily subdued by AI Kaifeng, but it was actually capable of eradicating a sliver of Di Tongxin's divine sense? How was this to be believed? But would Di Tongxin joke about this kind of matter? Strange, everyone declared, but also became even more cautious. They did not dare to enter this corpse using their divine sense any longer, preferring to avoid suffering the same consequences that Di Tongxin had suffered. Monarch tears like them were destined to reach the highest cultivation level of the celestial path, so their spirit definitely had to be complete. Even if the slightest sliver was lost, it would still have a powerful influence on their future cultivation levels. They wanted to cut open this corpse, but the battle previously had already proven that this corpse's physique was incredibly tough, and it could not be damaged through brute force or regulations. It was practically comparable to a celestial tool, so how were they supposed to deal with it? But there had to be some kind of massive secret hidden behind this corpse. If the secret that could strengthen the physique to the extent of divine metal could be uncovered, just what kind of height could that boost their own battle prowess to? When they thought about this, everyone's breathing became slightly heavy. Only Ling Han was completely unconcerned. He had cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and the toughness of his physique was something that even a reincarnated ninth heaven celestial king like Ji Wuming had to admit his inferiority in the face of. Naturally, he would not be envious of this kind of inhuman creature. What he was curious about was whether this corpse was really dead or otherwise. Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword, boosted it with the regulation of slaughter and metal, and then sliced at the corpse. Sparks erupted from the corpse, and it released a shrill, uncomfortable screech of friction, causing everyone to frown. What are you doing? AI Kaifeng immediately rebuked. At first, he was already very irritated, and Ling Han actually caused such an annoying noise. Was he looking for death? Ling Han merely slanted a sideways glance at him, but did not speak. He disdained from giving any regard to this kind of idiot, who had much too high an opinion of himself, and was completely self-centered, thinking that everyone should listen to him. Just go to hell. Seeing that Ling Han had actually ignored him, AI Kaifeng immediately flew into a rage. They had just entered the mystery realm, and one of their companions had gone mad, so they could only subdue him forcefully. And now, they had encountered this kind of mystifying, bizarre happening, causing him to become easily angered and hot-tempered. "Do you think I do not dare to touch you?" AI Kaifeng threatened sinisterly. His strength was completely superior to Ling Han's, and in terms of background, the Imperial Void Sect was also a Ninth Heaven Celestial King level force, and the Sealed Emotion Palace that backed them was a heavenly venerable tier-level force that had even surpassed Ninth Heaven Celestial King tier. Thus, he could be completely unreserved in his actions, as long as he was just a little bit in the right. Hee. Ling Han only chuckled. He had used the source power of slaughter, and 4 leaves fluttered lightly. They were obviously extremely fragile, seeming as if they could be blown over by just a breeze, yet could burst out with destructive power that was capable of slicing apart the dome of heaven. He once more delivered a slash towards the corpse. He was sure that there would be extraordinary effects from this now, because his own physique was the same. A direct attack would be completely ineffective, and one could only use the power of regulation to slowly kill him. "You're looking for death." AI Kaifeng roared in fury. Not only did this brat completely ignore him, he even actually dared to disobey him, and still planned to mess around with that corpse. Wasn't this just deliberately opposing him? Even if he couldn't kill Ling Han, he was determined to teach this guy a harsh lesson. Boom! He moved aggressively and shot out a punch. Like a god of fire displaying his might, flames filled the skies. Though Unran was internally extremely displeased, since she had promised her respected master that she would take care of Ling Han, she could only suppress her own displeasure at this time. With a leap, she stood in front of Ling Han, and then stretched out her hand to parry the blow. Pong! Energy surged out madly, and the regulations of the great Tao clashed, bursting out with soaring flames and light. Unran was completely unmoved, but AI Kaifeng took a consecutive 7 steps back as a streak of blood gushed from the palm of his hand. "Holy daughter Unran, what is the meaning of this?" AI Kaifeng demanded in displeasure, and felt a sliver of wariness as well. Though he was a monarch tier himself, Unran was a monarch among monarchs, and possessed the strength to suppress him. Chapter 2147, Blood Insect. Chapter 2147, Blood Insect. Unran naturally was very unwilling to step out for Ling Han, but Shangji Wei had issued a strict command to her, and how could she possibly dare to disobey the command of her master? She could ignore anyone in this world, but the only one she did not dare and could not disobey was Shangji Wei. The debt of raising her, the kindness of teaching her was like the heaven and earth for her. She only looked calmly at AI Kaifeng and said, "I will not interfere at other times, but this time, no one is allowed to touch a single hair on his head, or that would mean becoming enemies with me." "Holy daughter Unran, you are so mighty," Lao Liang exclaimed coldly, sinister killing intent seeping from him. Though he was only an ordinary monarch tier as well, how could he allow his morale to weaken when he originated from the Imperial Void Sect? Unfortunately, though Yulan Fenghua was also a top-tier monarch tier, he was only a heaven soul at present. Without advancing into the Immortal Palace tier, how could he possibly compare to Unran? "Then we'll just go all out in battle. Whom would I be afraid of?" Unran was extremely assertive. That was the type of woman she was. Everyone, please calm your anger." Lin Xian stepped out as mediator. His aim was to incite the members of the Imperial Void Sect to target Ling Han, but he absolutely did not have the slightest intention for Unran to also be dragged in. Furthermore, he had not thought that Unran would actually step out for Ling Han's sake, either, which made him feel slightly puzzled. Look!" Di Tongxin suddenly exclaimed. She was pointing at that corpse. Everyone turned their eyes in that direction, and saw that a slight bit of the corpse had actually been cut from the strike delivered by Ling Han's sharp blade. This portion was the wound on the sole of the foot of the corpse that had been pierced by the insect sting. Initially, the wound had already scabbed over, and now it had once again been sliced open. AI Kaifeng instantly appeared slightly embarrassed. The reason for him making a move on Ling Han was that the latter was causing trouble for no reason and causing an irritating noise. But he had not thought that the latter was not just messing around, but had really cut open this corpse. This was equivalent to slapping him in the face. What he had not managed to do, Ling Han had successfully accomplished. What a joke. The other was merely a heaven soul. No matter how overbearing AI Kai Feng was, he could say nothing at this point. He shut his mouth tightly, yet the killing intent in his heart was bubbling to its pinnacle. He could not tolerate anyone that dared to embarrass him. Yet Ling Han did not take it to heart at all. At present, AI Kai Feng was indeed stronger than him, but that was only true for the present. He only had to advance into the Immortal Palace tier, and he would be able to suppress AI Kai Feng with a flip of his hand. His concentration was completely focused on that corpse. As the divine demon's sword sliced continuously, the wound was also endlessly deepening and growing larger. Finally, some clues could be perceived. Gasp! The others were only looking, and when they saw clearly, they couldn't help but inhale sharply. Within that wound, there were actually multiple tiny insects squirming. These insects were only the size of a rice grain and were blood-red in color. It was unknown whether they had been of this color in the first place, or if they had been dyed red by blood. However, while these bugs were tiny, they exuded an incredibly evil air, inciting an extreme feeling of disgust just upon first sight. Ling Han was shocked. This kind of disgust did not originate from himself, but was rather an indescribable feeling. He just felt disgusted, and there was no reason for it. This was a hatred originating from the heavenly Tao, similar to that caused by the cultivators of the other cultivation system. The tiny insects were the same? Ling Han was not very sure. There was a large disparity between these insects and the cultivators of the other cultivation system that he had come into contact with, but there was a similar stink to them, which was indeed strange. What was stranger was the fact that this wound that had been sliced open was actually squirming, as if it had gained consciousness and wanted to heal the wound. Humph! Lao Liang smirked coldly and swiped out a finger, slicing towards that wound. He could not damage that corpse, but now that there was a wound, how could it be that he would still be unable to? As the finger swiped out, the regulations of the Great Tao turned into a blade that slashed onto these insects. Zhi, these insects released a sharp cry, being forcibly crushed into dust by the power of regulation. And when these insects were dead, the squirming of the wound immediately stopped, as if it had suddenly lost all life. Everyone sighed in relief. It looked like the mutation of the corpse was because of these insects. Thankfully, though the corpse could be considered indestructible, these insects could be easily killed. However, everyone's optimism immediately disappeared without a trace, because new insects were crawling out very soon, and the wound that had stopped recovering was once again squirming. Could it be that this corpse was filled entirely with insects? These insects were strange creatures of this place, crawling into this corpse and causing havoc, or was it merely because of that insect sting? If it was the former scenario, there were really thorns all over this place, and they had to be extremely cautious. And if it was the latter case, that would be even more terrifying. It was just a single insect sting, so how could it have possibly transmitted these creatures? And this insect sting had clearly been broken off, so how terrifying would the owner be? Previously, Lao Liang and the others had already said that the alchemical pill that Ziwen had ingested could heal the powerful poison of anything below Celestial King tier, but the result was the complete opposite. So what did that mean? This poison was of the Celestial King tier. Could it be that an insect that had ascended Tao and become a Celestial King had died here, its corpse scattered throughout this mystery realm? With the strength of a Celestial King, even a part that had been dropped from his body even when who knew how many billions and billions of years had passed would still possess the ability to easily destroy the defenses of an immortal palace tier. This land of the ancient age could possibly contain an astonishing secret, Rand said, a hint of excitement flashing over her face. The more dangerous it was, the more she longed for it because danger also accompanied great fortune. Everyone nodded in unison, but it was not just the few of them that were here. There were also colossal beings like celestial kings. If there really was any great fortune, then the chance of them obtaining it was astonishingly slim. However, something like great fortune would have to depend on your own fate and good luck in the first place. It did not mean that just because one was stronger, one would definitely obtain it. Because Ling Han had not suppressed the wound of the corpse very soon recovered. This corpse also released groaning sounds, wanting to climb back to its feet. Refine him with the power of regulations. Everyone made their move, using the regulations of heaven and earth to refine the corpse. At this, the corpse finally stopped releasing any human-like noises, but rather issued the hum of insects, which was incredibly shrill. The corpse suddenly exploded into a shower of blood, and then countless blood insects flew out. It was precisely the disgusting creatures that they had previously seen. They danced all over the skies, unleashing their attacks towards Ling Han and the others. Inconceivable. That corpse was clearly extremely tough and could not be damaged through pure force. It could only be refined through the use of regulations, yet now it had suddenly exploded, as if that was just a pile of ordinary flesh and blood. It was all because of those blood insects. Blood insects surged out like a hurricane and assaulted Yulan Fenghua first. Yulan Fenghua was enraged. Why did these insects attack him first? Could it be that they thought that he was the weakest? That was indeed the case. Though he was a super monarch tier, and Ran, Laoliang, and the others were all at first secret, so they naturally overwhelmed him completely, and though Ling Han was also a heaven soul, he was a freak on the level of Ji Wuming, and was also more powerful. Thus, this flock of insects attacked Yulan Fenghua first. 3,000 karmic flames, he roared. Boom! A fierce flame immediately surged from his body, burning endlessly. This was a celestial technique that he had newly learned. He could only use it once he had reached Heaven's Soul, and its might was truly terrifying. Multiple seals of great Tao leapt, feeling as if it was capable of melting even pseudo-divine metal into liquid metal. Instantly, large masses of insects were killed, but even more insects were charging over. Chapter 2148, Going Separate Ways. Chapter 2148, Going Separate Ways. Laoliang and the others naturally wouldn't just sit by and watch. They each sent out a palm strike and resolved the danger for Yulan Fenghua. Boom! The swarm of insects instantly died by the masses. When they entered into a human body, they would be able to turn a corpse incredibly tough, but they themselves were extremely fragile and weak. Facing a first secret monarch tier, they had completely no power to resist. Xiao, a blood insect the size of a fist, charged out suddenly from the swarm of insects. Its mouthpart was an extremely sharp sting, and it rapidly pounced on Yulan Fenghua. Mother insect. The insect queen. Everyone exclaimed loudly. Though the names were all different, the only thing that could be confirmed was that this insect should be a being like a queen bee, and was the leader of the whole swarm. And Ran moved. With only a flick of a slender finger, an ice spike shot out like a sharp sword and pierced that mother insect, nailing it to the trunk of a tree. The mother insect's tail waved a few times, and all its movements very soon stopped. It had finally died. With its death, the swarm of insects that were still dancing in the air immediately dropped in unison, their corpses scattered all over the ground. It looked like not only was the mother insect leading the whole swarm of insects, it was even their source of life. The moment it died, everything would be finished. Finally settled. So troublesome. To kill these insects, it was necessary to first kill the host that they were living off of, and refine it through the power of regulation, forcing the insect swarm to appear, and then kill the mother insect. Only then would one be able to completely kill them off. They all wanted to know something. What if the person that had been hit was a 4th secret or 5th secret elite, or ascending origin tier? Then they would only be able to flee in the face of that kind of opponent. But this kind of worry could not deter their determination to advance at all. The more dangerous it was, the higher the chances that an astonishing treasure could be gained. Meanwhile, Ling Han secretly drew out that old map and surveyed it. This was definitely not something as simple as just a drawing, but rather was a precious item that had been created with considerable effort. For example, when Ling Han had been outside, the map only showed the landscape of the celestial realm. However, after entering here, the map automatically enlarged, showing the conditions of the area around where Ling Han was presently at. When he inserted his divine sense, a three-dimensional map could even appear in his mind, and he could see every single detail extremely clearly. Of course, this map had been created who knew how many years ago, and it was possible that great changes had also taken place here, and it might have become completely different from what it had been all those years ago. Yet Ling Han was more inclined towards the idea of there being no change, or only very small changes. This place should be a place that was completely cut off from the rest of the world. If changes had only taken place internally, the changes should be limited. He studied the map carefully. They were presently in a dense jungle, and if they continued onwards, there would be a great mountain, which would be followed by a lake, but the map did not show what lay behind the lake. Possibly, he would have to walk further ahead for the map to show further details. Because the map had been enlarged, there were even more details, but correspondingly, the macroscopic aspect would become smaller. There was an arrow on the map, indicating that Ling Han had to continue walking onwards. Because they now knew how frightening the insect sting was, they became even more cautious as they journeyed onwards, and they also saw even more corroded corpses. They had discovered some a bit too late, and were attacked by the corpses. However, they only wasted a little time to refine the corpses and force out the insect swarms, which they killed. Some they discovered earlier and managed to circle around them in time, avoiding a battle. Their luck was not too bad, as they had not encountered 4th secret, 5th secret, or even ascending origin tier victims. Otherwise, they would only be capable of fleeing in panic. Actually, Ling Han hoped that they would encounter such existences. In that way, he would be able to take advantage of the opportunity and split off from Ran and the rest, creating an opportunity for himself to sneak off. Over a dozen days later, they finally exited the dense jungle. A steep peak that pierced directly into the clouds appeared ahead of them. Divine clouds entwined around it like it was the finger of a celestial king, exuding a boundless, intimidating pressure. There must be a precious treasure on this mountain, AI Kaifeng declared decisively. We need to explore the mountain. Lin Xian expressed his agreement. Then, let's go. Yet Ling Han did not move a single step. Shaking his head, he said, I have no interest in climbing the mountain. The map was pointing straight ahead all this while, and previously, the two great celestial kings, Great Cloud Celestial King and Spiritual Mountain Celestial King, had both come here. Even if they considered the treasure here beneath them, there were still other ascending origin tier elites. Furthermore, the celestial kings that had come here were not just limited to the two of them. If there really was some kind of treasure on the mountain, how could a dividing soul tier like himself possibly be capable of taking his share of the loot? Boom! On the peak, there would occasionally be dazzling flashes of light flickering. That was a battle on the level of ascending origin tier, at least, and that could be perceived from the seals of Great Tao. Brat, I was not asking for your opinion. AI Kaifeng retorted menacingly. He only felt furious Ling Han was again opposing him. I said that there was treasure on the mountain, and wanted to climb the mountain, yet you say you're not interested. What are you trying to say here? Lin Xian was also displeased. Ling Han, what is your cultivation level? Since we have decided to climb the mountain, what right do you have to refuse? It can't be that you're afraid, right? Haha, without even the courage to seize food from the tiger's mouth, your accomplishments will be limited as well. If you're so capable, just try and defeat an ascending origin tier, Ling Han casually retorted. Absolute nonsense, Lin Xian humphed. Ling Han crossed his arms over his chest. I dare to say that I can take over a dozen blows from an immortal palace tier, but would you dare to take over a dozen blows from an ascending origin tier? Everyone would be challenging an opponent that was a major tier superior, which was relatively fair. Lin Xian couldn't help but feel embarrassed and could not talk back either. Ling Han was just a freak, remaining completely unscathed even after taking 2 consecutive blows from Ran. But if it was Lin Xian, any ascending origin tier would be able to insta-kill him. How was he supposed to talk back? AI Kaifeng and the others were stunned. Ling Han could really endure over a dozen strikes from an Immortal Palace tier? Wasn't that a joke? The Immortal Palace tier would completely crush the Dividing Soul tier, and this was an iron rule that anyone would know. It was a truth of the world. I don't want to go up the mountain either, Unran said. You guys can go on ahead, and I'll leave with Ling Han. I'll go with you, Lin Xian quickly declared. How could he possibly be willing to separate from Unran? And it was even less possible that he would be willing to provide a chance for Unran and Ling Han to be alone. If so, we'll go our separate ways for now. Di Tongxin smiled slightly. Sister Unran, take care? Unran nodded. She was not particularly skilled in socializing. Lin Xian, meanwhile, was an expert in making connections. After chatting for a good while with the 4 members of the Imperial Void Sect, he finally waved them goodbye and walked next to Unran. Ling Han secretly complained about his misfortune. There were still 2 tagalongs with him. How was he supposed to throw them off his tail? Let's go, Unran stated coldly. She was already getting impatient from waiting. The 3 of them advanced, circling directly around the tall mountain, and a narrow, long lake appeared ahead of them. Though it was described as narrow, that was only speaking in relative terms when compared to its length. In fact, the width of this lake had reached several tens of thousands of meters, and large fishes could occasionally be seen leaping out of the waters, creating waves that were as tall as several hundred meters. But an eagle streaked past and easily caught such a large fish, leaving with a flap of its wings. The weak would be prey for the strong. This was the law of the jungle. This place is even more dangerous, Unran stated calmly, though there was a strong caution in her tone. Ling Han nodded inwardly because that giant fish was shockingly at the ascending origin tier. With a hua, the lake waters split apart, and a colossal creature climbed out of the lake and onto the banks. It was shaped like a crocodile, but only had 3 legs, one in front and the other 2 at the back. Its tail was wide and thick, and it was covered with scales that looked like black iron, sharp as saws. This was not the most frightening part. What was terrifying was the aura that was released by this crocodile. 5th secret, Lin Xian immediately exclaimed, his eyes narrowing slightly. Chapter 2149, 3-Legged Crocodile. Chapter 2149, 3-Legged Crocodile. Lin Xian was a monarch tier, and could be invincible even with a superior gap of 2 minor levels. Thus, not only was he capable of overwhelming ordinary 3rd secrets, he could manage a battle even against ordinary 4th secrets. At least, he would be able to retreat safely. However, against a 5th secret, his only course was to die in defeat. Not just him, even Unran, who was a super monarch tier, could not possibly be the match for a 5th secret elite. Thus, when this colossal creature appeared, Lin Xian and Unran were naturally both astounded. They could not afford a battle, and forceful confrontation would result in definite death. Their only option was to run. This 3-legged crocodile immediately charged over, opening its ferocious mouth as it bit towards Ling Han and the others. Run! Unran exclaimed, and as her figure leapt, she did not forget to grab out at Ling Han. She had not forgotten Shang Jiwei's words that she was to protect Ling Han. Lin Xian saw this happen and instantly went mad with jealousy. He naturally was unaware of Shang Jiwei's command, and merely thought that Unran was concerned about Ling Han. Naturally, his flames of jealousy burned brightly, wanting nothing more than to tear Ling Han into pieces. Ling Han's physique was incredibly tough, but in terms of battle prowess, he was naturally no match for a 1st secret monarch tier. Thus, Unran naturally grabbed him easily, and he could not resist in the slightest. Xiao, Unran used a movement technique as quick as light. Lin Xian followed closely behind, his eyes glowering at Ling Han, not bothering to hide his killing intent in the slightest. Ling Han saw this and felt slightly gloomy. I have no wish to have a woman grab me like this either, firstly because it's embarrassing, and secondly, how am I supposed to run like this? If Lin Xian knew the complaint that Ling Han was thinking, he would definitely be even angrier. Wasn't this just refusing to admit that he had received a benefit? And Lin Xian ran, and the three-legged crocodile pursued them. Its 3 legs stomped, yet did not touch the ground at all. It was as if the air had become the sea, and it could swim freely in the air. However, if the major tier was close enough, the speed of cultivators was actually more or less the same, unless the regulations they cultivated were specialized in fleeing. For example, the regulations of lightning, the regulations of space. Of course, not all regulations of lightning and regulations of space were specialized in speed. However, it just so happened that this 3-legged crocodile was specialized in the regulations of lightning and regulations that were inclined towards speed at that. As its 3 legs paddled, flashes of lightning flickered behind it, causing it to burst out with astonishing speed. It had clearly started off later, and there was still a great distance between it and Ling Han's group, but as it pursued, it was rapidly shortening the distance between the two sides. "We can't throw it off, let's battle," Ran declared resolutely. If they encountered another 5th secret, or even ascending origin tier demonic beast at this moment, then they would really be dead. All right. Lin Xian was also a monarch tier, so he naturally did not lack fighting spirit. The two of them stood firm, and Ran casually tossed Ling Han to the side. Then, a mirror appeared in her hands. It appeared to be quite similar to the Great Sun Heavenly King mirror. This was a replica at the Immortal Palace tier. Wang, the precious mirror replica shone, shooting out streaks of light. Some shone on Ran, while others fell on the 3-legged crocodile, and the effects produced were completely different. Those that landed on Ran boosted her battle prowess, while it seriously weakened the battle prowess of the 3-legged crocodile. Even against a 5th secret elite, this could still be extraordinarily effective. Pong! Ran charged towards the 3-legged crocodile and exchanged a blow with this colossal creature. However, she immediately became a streak of light as she was heavily sent flying backwards. Even if her own battle prowess had been boosted, while her opponent's had been decreased, there was a total gap of 4 minor levels between the two sides. And how could it simply be compensated just because a monarch tier now had the use of a precious tool? She was still no match. Lin Xian hurriedly approached. Meanwhile, he had summoned a long spear, and as he brandished it, it was like a green dragon had risen from the sea, releasing multiple roars of a dragon. This was also a pseudo-celestial tool, and had incredible might. Unfortunately, that 3-legged crocodile was too strong. Merely with a sweep of its tail, it sent Lin Xian flying backwards. However, Ran had also charged back and restrained this 3-legged crocodile, not giving it the chance to hunt Lin Xian down. The two of them battled in this manner. Taking it in turns, they would restrain the 3-legged crocodile. Though they were at a complete disadvantage in this situation, if the 3-legged crocodile did not manage to succeed even after a long battle, it would probably retreat on its own discreetly. Ling Han watched for a while, and knew that Ran's safety was assured. Furthermore, with the fact that Shang Jiwei was willing to let her come out, the former most probably had bestowed on her some kind of super treasure, though its use would be limited, or she would have to pay a great sacrifice for its use. His feelings towards Shang Jiwei were very conflicted. He was furious that she had killed Long Yuexi, but at the same time, the concern that Shang Jiwei showed him was genuine, and made him feel slightly touched as well. Thus, he was also concerned for this disciple of Shang Jiwei. When he was sure that she would be fine, he smiled and said, "I would not be of help even if I stayed, so I won't stay around to be a hindrance. I'll leave first." Saying this, he broke into a run and fled. "Stand right there," Ran exclaimed furiously. Aside from agreeing to protect Ling Han, she had also been assigned another mission, and that was not to let Ling Han out of her sight. There was a person inside his spatial god tool that her master was determined to kill. She did not know why Shang Jiwei had not simply used brute force with her astonishing strength, but since Shang Jiwei had said so, she had to fulfill the mission fully. When a woman had a job, they would sometimes disregard all consequences completely. She suddenly turned and left, setting off in pursuit of Ling Han. Lin Xian was astounded. How could he possibly be capable of blocking a fifth secret-tier immortal beast on his own? Pung! He had barely even finished the thought when he was struck by a sweep of the three-legged crocodile's tail, and had been sent flying who knew how far. Thankfully, the three-legged crocodile had not set off to pursue him, but rather switched its target to Ling Han and ran. To be more accurate, it was Ling Han that it was targeting because it could sense that there was something that it needed within Ling Han's body. Source power of heaven and earth. Ran's figure shot forwards furiously, quickly shortening the distance between herself and Ling Han. Just when it looked like he was about to surpass the maximum limit of Ran's assault range, Ling Han immediately cast void space. Space warped, and innumerable mirrors appeared. It seemed like he was everywhere. If this was any other time, Ran naturally could easily move to crush all the mirror images. Then, there would be nowhere for Ling Han to hide, and he could only be captured by her. However, presently, there was still an immortal beast at the fifth secret chasing behind her, so what time would she have to make a move? She could only wait, but the three-legged crocodile was rapidly catching up to her. With a sweep of its tail, endless energy swept out madly, and those mirror images were instantly shattered. Where was Ling Han? Ran involuntarily frowned. She had been waiting for Ling Han's true self to appear, but under the sweep of the three-legged crocodile's tail, all the mirror doppelgangers were already destroyed, yet there was still no trace of Ling Han. How could someone completely disappear like that? A spatial god tool? She had not considered this possibility at all, unless it was a spatial god tool that a celestial king had forged from divine metal that should be considered a spatial celestial tool then. Otherwise, no spatial god tool could possibly hold up to this kind of blast. Because a spatial god tool could only be forged from level 20 godly metal, and could not be forged from pseudo-divine metal, the godly metal that overlapped would cause spatial effects, and could not possibly be successfully forged. And using divine metal to forge a spatial celestial tool was much too luxurious. Even with the wealth of the Four Seas Palace, they could not afford it. There were so many celestial kings waiting to use divine metal to forge celestial tools. Then where was Ling Han? Even if he had been killed with the strike from the three-legged crocodile, there should still have been some scraps left, and there should have been shattered pieces of his spirit as well. How strange. However, after the three-legged crocodile faltered for a moment, it then unleashed a fierce assault against her. Chapter 2150, Almost Insta-Killed. Chapter 2150, Almost Insta-Killed. With the attack of a strong enemy, Ran naturally did not have the leisure to search for Ling Han's whereabouts, or think about exactly where the latter had gone. As she battled, she retreated, fleeing off farther and farther. I finally tossed her off my back. Ling Han came out of the Black Tower and breathed a long sigh of relief. Now, he was really free to go anywhere he wanted. His brow immediately furrowed in a frown as he sensed a familiar aura was rapidly rushing towards him. Ling Han. Lin Xian released a furious roar, and he charged over from a distance. With him stabbing his spear into the air in front of him, suddenly the force of the spear took shape and shot towards Ling Han like a sharp arrow. As this spear attack swept past, the ground around him all cracked, showing how frightening this blow was. Or was it rather that the surroundings of this place were extraordinarily sturdy? Otherwise, with such a sweeping blow from a first secret monarch tier, this place would have long since been turned into a great pit that was as deep and wide as an ocean. Ling Han thought for a moment and then did not enter into the Black Tower. Instead, he turned around and ran. To enter into the Black Tower whenever he got into trouble was not advisable. Can you run? Lin Xian smirked coldly, pursuing him relentlessly. Ling Han laughed loudly and drew out the divine demon sword. He turned around and delivered a slash, the sword chi alarming. Even if Lin Xian was a first secret monarch tier, he did not dare allow this strike to land on him. However, his strength was too powerful. He merely clenched his fist and shot out a punch, and this streak of sword chi was shattered, and his speed only paused for just a slight moment. Just how wide was the gap in speed between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier? Lin Xian quickly closed the distance between the two of them. His right hand wielded the spear, while his left hand was free as he blasted out an attack at Ling Han. At present, his jealousy was on full throttle, and there was no one around, either. Even if he killed Ling Han, there would be no one who would know. He could just blame it on those ferocious beasts. What would it have to do with him? Die! A vicious light flashed through Ling Han's eyes as well. He actually turned against the flow and greeted Lin Xian's attack head-on. Pong! The force of the punch reached him. This was a blow that could break 4-star pseudo-divine metal from its force, but when it landed on Ling Han, it did not cause any kind of damage and only sent Ling Han flying backwards. Wong, wong, wong. Void space unfolded, and Ling Han switched out. Immediately, he appeared behind Lin Xian and sent out his own punch. Ha 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 ha, I have already seen this move before. Do you think I will have no precautions in place? Lin Xian countered with a smirk. He sent out his spear in a reverse stab. It was fast, accurate, vicious, and ruthless, showing fully the strength he possessed as a monarch tier. Ling Han was neither angered nor shocked, and was presently gathering momentum for a super storm. Great Clash of Source Powers. The Great Clash of Source Powers was created from combining 5 source powers of heaven and earth, so how great would its might be? It was enough to explode a hole in the void. Immediately, Lin Xian paled in great shock. This attack was so terrifying that it was completely unimaginable to him. He admitted that Ling Han was very strong, being capable of sustaining a few blows from even a first secret monarch tier, but he absolutely did not think that Ling Han's battle prowess could actually threaten him. But when this attack was launched, he immediately sensed that if he was hit, he would be dead beyond a doubt. But he had underestimated his enemy too far. Yes, he knew that Ling Han's physique was astonishingly tough, and also knew that the latter possessed an ability allowing instant movement. Thus, this counter from Ling Han was completely within his expectations. However, precisely because of this, he had been careless, because he had not taken Ling Han's strength to heart at all. Thinking of dodging only now? How could that be? Boom! A great explosion took place in the air, and the area within the surrounding 5 kilometers was completely flattened. However, when the storm of energy stopped, Lin Xian was still standing, and there was a seal with an indescribable shape flickering behind him, exuding a supreme aura. The seal bestowed by a celestial king had just managed to block that fatal blow. As expected, though the spiritual mountain celestial king had left, how could he be completely unprepared? With the protective regulations personally bestowed by a 7th heaven celestial king, even an ascending origin tier could not possibly kill Lin Xian. Of course, now that the celestial king tier seal had been used, its power would begin to disappear. Thus, this was a last resort to save his life, and could not be used easily. Lin Xian stared at Ling Han in shock, his face bearing an expression of absolute disbelief. He, a monarch tier of his era, a great and noble immortal palace tier, had actually almost been killed by a mere heaven soul, and it would be an insta-kill at that. He was still blowing his own trumpet. If he had not been given a power boost from the spiritual mountain celestial king, how could he possibly be exclaiming in shock at this moment? This person was too dangerous. Lin Xian's expression was filled with shock, but the killing intent in his heart had already reached a point of no return. At this moment, no matter who appeared, no one would be able to stop him from killing Ling Han. Without killing this brat, he would not be able to rest or eat in peace. Die! He charged out once more, but since he now knew that Ling Han had such a frightening deadly move, he naturally had prepared himself as well. If he made the same mistake twice, he would not deserve the name of a monarch tier. Of course, Ling Han sent out another strike of Great Clash of Source Powers, yet Lin Xian managed to leap away in time, and left the attack range of this move far behind him. What's wrong? Not daring to take the blow? Ling Han grinned widely. I have taken all your strikes head-on, yet you don't dare to face my attacks head-on. What kind of immortal palace tier are you? Fuck, it's not me that is weak here, but rather that you are too freakish. What dividing soul tier's attack could penetrate the defenses of an immortal palace tier and pose a threat to the latter? And how many dividing soul tiers would have defenses that could hold up to even the attack of an immortal palace tier? Ling Han was the only one. How could there be such a freak in this world? And Lin Xian could not retort either. It was indeed he, an immortal palace tier, that was dodging and not daring to face Ling Han's strike head-on. He was really going to kill himself with his depression. Die, die, die. Lin Xian had learned his lesson and did not approach Ling Han further. Instead, he delivered his attacks from a distance. He was superior to Ling Han by a major tier, and even if there was such a wide distance between them, he could still pose a massive threat to Ling Han with such long-distance attacks. On the other side, Ling Han's great clash of source powers was limited by distance and could no longer become a threat to Lin Xian. In this manner, Ling Han was instantly in a crisis. Ling Han no longer lingered in battle. The great clash of source powers could only be an unexpected move, and if he could not deal with his opponent with a single blow, he would have no further chances afterwards. If he still had another source power of heaven and earth, he could just enter into the Black Tower and directly cultivate to the consummate level of dividing 9 souls before coming back out. By then, he would be equivalent to the first secret immortal palace tier, and he would then be able to turn around and oppress Lin Xian as easily as mowing down weeds. Still trying to escape? No way. Lin Xian set off in pursuit. There was absolutely no way he was going to let his opponent leave. Today, Ling Han definitely had to die. Ling Han ignored him completely and only used his movement technique, moving as fast as lightning. Lin Xian used all the means at his disposal, but Ling Han's methods of ensuring his own safety were varied and plentiful. Void space allowed him to have thousands and thousands of mirror images, while the indestructible heaven scroll allowed him to sustain attacks that were above his limits. When the indestructible true fluid channeled, he could instantly return back to the prime of his health from a near-death state. One pursued, while the other fled. 7 days passed, and Lin Xian couldn't help but feel shocked. In such a long time, he actually failed to capture a mere heaven soul. His killing intent burned even brighter, while he was also filled with curiosity about Ling Han. This person had to have some massive secret to him, or how could he possibly be so freakish? He would kill this guy and snatch his great fortune for himself. Thus, he strengthened his resolution. He had completely dismissed the idea of seeking the treasure that was possibly within this mystery realm from his mind, and focused on pursuing Ling Han. He was sure that if he captured Ling Han, his gains would surpass all else. Another half-month later, an unknown coldness suddenly rose up in Lin Xian. A blood-red fog was wafting right ahead, and this filled him with endless chills. Involuntarily, he stopped moving. If he chased into this fog, he would definitely die. This was his instinctive feeling. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.